Good morning, everyone. With great joy and excitement, I welcome the distinguished guests, students, alumni, staff, and faculty members to this Silver Jubilee Foundation Day celebrations of DA-IICT. On this day in 2001, students stepped into our classrooms for the first time, and thus began our journey to fulfill the vision of Sri Dhirubhai Ambani, whose name graces our institute. In our Silver Jubilee year, through a series of events, we wish to look back at our achievements, indulge in some well-earned nostalgia, and honor the people who in their different ways have made this institute what it is today. However, today, on our Foundation Day, we want to look ahead. DA-IICT has transitioned into Dhirubhai Ambani University, DAU. We have created new programs in data science, design, VLSI, and math and computing. A school of law has come into existence, and the first set of students have started as part of this program this semester. DAU is also scaling up, widening its footprint through exploring online channels. DA-IICT started with a pioneering undergraduate program in ICT, a first for India. As DAU now, we want to explore new pathways through which conventional campus education is reimagined. As we all know, AI is changing in very, very fundamental ways how as a society we communicate and we learn, and it is only fitting if DAU positions itself as pioneers in the way higher education itself
Hello. Good morning, everyone. Tridip Surad on the testimonies of indigo cultivators of Champaran. Tridip Surad is a professor and provost of SEPT University, Ahmedabad. He is also director of Lalbi.
Some amount of deceit and some amount of clever play. There was no reason why any batch of students should have joined us. We were 4 of us. There was not a single building here. What we had was intent and a man called V.V. Bhatt. A tent was, an air-conditioned tent was put outside, very largely saying the entire first batch is guaranteed job with Reliance Infocom. By afternoon we were done. Right? And that's how, with a slight con, the institute began. And then the buildings came up, not the kind of buildings that Ahmedabad is used to having for institutions. We were hoping that there would be another Louis Kahn equivalent kind of a building. We got a PWD building. So we decided to hide them through these lovely trees, which Amitav Tihotia, Binita Desai and I started planting.
I was there when the bill for the DAU, for DA-IICT as a university was being debated in the assembly. I remember that day very well because the secretary who signed that bill did not return my pen. So you guys owe me a very fine fountain pen. It's still there somewhere in Gandhinagar. I won't tell you the name of the person, but he actually took it. But that's not, the first lecture here was mine because the projection system couldn't be fixed for an hour and a half without any visual aids. And that's how the institution began. But that's not really what I want to tell you. But there was actually there was purpose why this institution was created. There was a vision to which, even when we make a transition, or we have made a transition from DA-IICT to Dhirubhai Ambani University, one, that we needed to create an institution that would serve the needs of industry. So the alignment with the kind of abilities, knowledge, capabilities that the institute seeks to provide had to be aligned with what the industry needed. And that relationship is very crucial for any institution which seeks to impart professional training. Now, if you were educated like I was or Madhumita were, where you went to class not knowing why, and you kept going to class for 12 years not knowing why, and you emerged at the other end still not knowing why. You're not like that. Yeah? You have a purpose, you have abilities, and what gives that purpose and abilities is the relationship to industry, which also means current practices of thought and ways of doing it. If we lose touch with, that's not the purpose of higher education. The purpose of higher education was, otherwise we should actually be a polytechnic. Do you actually need to incorporate that as a university? It's a conscious decision to incorporate that as a university for two reasons. One, that we knew that this knowledge had to be embedded in its context. And that's the reason why this institution, from where it's instead knowledge in context. The context being provided by society, by political economy, by cultural practices, by history of ideas, and that's what you do. Okay? So you needed to embed knowledge, practices of industry, even emerging things within a context. And if we lose sight of that context, we are very close to becoming a polytechnic. Let's not go down that path, because the idea of the university is very important. And what is this idea of the university? That we are able to do two things. And that's, I think, where the excitement of being part of this new journey of a DAU is. It's not something that has been thought of by 4 of us sitting in the governing council. Oh, we are bored with DA-IICT, let's move to DAU, it's grander. No. There's a purpose why we decided to actually go for a new identity, visual identity, but also a new conceptual identity. And the reason is very simple. We do believe that these 25 years of learning as an institution have been important to us. We have remained true in some measure to the first principle, which is that we needed to serve the needs of the industry. We may not have necessarily remained true to the second vision that we needed to embed this knowledge in its context. Somewhere that context making has been lost sight of. We hope that this reminder of it being a university and not a polytechnic was an important thing in two ways. One, that we needed to bring in new set of intellectual disciplines to have a bearing on what we do or what the institute had been doing, which was to look at technology, its applications, its development, its deployment, and which also hopefully leading to betterment of human life. We felt that technology by itself, however defined, however broadly defined, would not do that. We needed to bring in at least two other disciplines to begin with very seriously. One which has been on our fringes for a very long time, which has been design. But can we reimagine that design and bring in a very different kind of relationship between technology and design, not as just users, but as creators of new content. So that was one idea. The other one was really looking at the entire regulatory realm. Regulatory realm comes through law. And it's not, and you would have realized that the kind of law school which has been conceptualized is unlike the other law schools. It's not a taught program in the conventional sense. It's very easy to fill up 240 seats in a undergraduate law program. In fact, in Ahmedabad, you could have a morning law school and an evening law school functioning out of the same building. We've not done that. We've decided to actually embed that into a research program. So between design, technology, research, we hope that these relationships, we are becoming future ready. Can we actually become future ready is the question that these guys are going to do. I have a view on it, but I'm going to keep that view to myself. What is important is that if you do not have the human being, human creativity, human proclivities, the wickedness that we are capable of, the goodness that we are capable of, at the heart of this imagination, that future is probably not worth living. But that's not. It's not a bleak scenario. It has huge potential. I did not sleep well, not because I heard the lecture, but just that I don't sleep well these days. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Suhrod, for sharing your wonderful anecdotes and the wisdom that you have shared with us. Now I'd like to invite the dignitaries for the Diya lighting ceremony. So if you could please come up on the podium.
गोले कैमरा वाला ना साइड में चली जाता
Thank you. Huh? Doesn't need to start.
So we'll begin with the keynote. We'll begin with the keynote addresses now. Thank you. So we'll begin with the keynote addresses now, and I'd request one of our students who
A very good morning to one and all present here. I'm Sanya Debarma, a second-year student of Electronics and VLSI Design. I would like to introduce Professor Ashok Jhunjhunwala, who is an institute professor at IIT Madras and chairman of IIT Hyderabad, Immersive Technology and Entrepreneurship Labs, and College of Engineering, Trivandrum. Until recently, he was the founder of IIT Madras Research Park and Incubation Cell, and was till recently its president. He completed his bachelor's from IIT Kanpur and his master's and PhD from the University of...
I think that's enough. Thank you. Thank you very much. Way back somewhere in 98 or so, there were some IITs, but IT revolution was just starting to peak. That time, we started conceiving of, and I was involved in setting up the first IIIT in Hyderabad. And right after that, we really felt that this whole model, and we did not want them to be the government institute. So we conceived of two more IITs, and we approached two gentlemen, Mukesh Ambani and Ellen Mittal. Immediately agreed to this institute, now this university in Ahmedabad. Ellen Mittal agreed to set up Ellen Mittal Institute of Information Technology. My job was to pursue people to become the directors of this institute. And I remember I had gone to Professor Kuchatkar, who was my professor at IIT Kanpur. Why don't you try to build? And similarly, is the mic. I think I can get rid of mic. This is a small enough room. I should be able to talk without that.
Sorry, this will work.
Huh? I think without mic, I should be able to talk. I think this is a small enough room.
That might be too much of
Not too much of a strain. Hello. So, once Mukesh Ambani agreed that we will set up something at Ahmedabad, and Ellen Mittal agreed that we will set up something at Jaipur, and then task was given to me, somehow persuade some top faculty to become the director. I remember going to Professor Kuchatkar, who was my professor at IIT Kanpur, and it took me quite some time because he was from chemical engineering. He says, information and communication technology, how can I head it? And I sat with him and spent time with him that you will be the right person to build this institute. And similarly, I went to Professor Vishwanath Sinha, who was also my teacher at IIT Kanpur, and I persuaded him to take over charge of Ellen Mittal. And I think I'm extremely happy. I couldn't join on the foundation day here. I'm extremely happy that this university has come up. I was also involved in then asking Professor Sahasrabuddhe to take charge of this institute. And I was on the board of this institute for quite some time.
So it's a great pleasure to come here and see this university having flourished, and today it is Foundation Day. I thought about when I was asked to give this talk, what to do, and I said that I will not talk about AI in particular. I will talk about what this institute can attempt to do. It can do, or can contribute over the next, when we discuss this, or 6 when we discuss this, but today is such a reality in UPI. So that's a way they said, well, take a leadership role and try to make India a product nation with the help of various institutes. And here comes the next important thing. There are about 70,000 scientists in the country. Whether they are in IITs, triple IITs, institute like this, CSIR lab, DRDO lab, they're about that. I don't have the exact number, but that kind of thing. Most of them publish paper and have occasional patents. Many of them are extremely good, but their focus is publication because that's what is required. At the same time, we have a very large number of youngsters, the kind of youngsters that I see here. I was trying to talk to them before we started, and I saw that people from very ordinary background, after they go through these institutes, and any institute, does not matter whether it is here or Chandigarh University today, they would then be willing to work hard and make a huge difference and build the kind of technologies which is otherwise unconceivable. And we have done that again and again in Research Park and Incubation Cell, and there are a large number all over the country, youngsters who can make a huge difference. I'll talk a little bit about them. So if you take them and you take large Indian problems, and I'm emphasizing large Indian problems, and use technology, build technology to solve them. If you do that, you can become a technology leader. And this is exactly what we thought of. So what we thought of is that in every area that we take up, every problem that we take up, we will of course find a leadership in one technologist, one business development person, and one economist commercial person. But we'll find a bunch of 8-10 researchers around the country. They will be multi-institutional. Not from one institute. No institute in one area will have enough people who can really reach the top. We have to create a multi-institutional consortium and then associate 10, 15 startups. Maybe from some of you out here tomorrow you can join the startup. And then go all out to solve the problem and make India a technology leader. Let me take examples. Let me take example, urban water loss. I don't know how much it happens in Ahmedabad, but pretty much in many other cities, significantly impacting the lives. Of course, it impacts the poorest people the most, but even the well-to-do people, it impacts. It hurts the economy. Question that I'm asking is, will India be like this for the next 25 years and next 100 years? Or will we develop technology, will use technology to say that existing cities, we will be able to eliminate water loss. Looks an impossible problem, very difficult problem. Flood frequency is increasing, but there are technologies available. And in fact, at IIT Gandhinagar, significant amount of work is going on. And yesterday I was talking to Prof G Venkatesh, let's involve DA-IICT, find the right faculty members who can work. And a lot of it is IT and other, but there are other technologies also, and it does not matter what you have studied, you can actually do all these things if you decide to do this. And we have created a consortium, and today we are all out. In fact, tomorrow is a meeting of a bunch of people that we will see to it the next 4 to 5 years, we'll find a solution such that waterlogging in urban areas get eliminated. A totally different problem. Rethinking urban transport. What happens? Today in Chennai, you travel from your home to office, maybe 12 kilometers, 30 kilometers, busy hour takes an hour 15 minutes. Going back, an hour 15 minutes. In Bangalore, it is worse. Pune, it is worse. I'm starting to see Ahmedabad is worse. I come here quite often and I see that worse. Can you therefore dream big? And that's what is needed. We will travel 15 kilometers, guaranteed travel end to end in 20 minutes. Looks impossible, but then that's a kind of challenge that we engineering people need to take up. And we have started building a consortium again, and it has to be a fully green transport, using only green electricity, must be most energy efficient, must be buildable in existing city, must be able to handle peak traffic, must be affordable and comfortable. And that's the kind of solution that we are building. I could have shown you some prototypes have been built, some full-fledged we are working on things. There are a whole lot of people from different institutes and startups who have come together to solve problems of this kind. A totally different but similar problem. If we from the Chennai port, if a goods have to be sent to Ahmedabad, it takes 5 days longer. Can we, and if our economy is going to continue to grow, and we talk about how economy will reach how many trillions, I don't remember, what will happen to the transport across the country? Will 5 days become 8 days, 10 days? Is that how we will develop? We are good at giving slogan, but what do we need to do as a technologist? We don't even try to put together. So we have sort of said, well, it has to be carried in 24 hours and must be highly energy efficient. So we are not talking about flying and things like that. Can we build solutions which can create autonomous vehicle traveling from one place to another, extremely green, using only green electricity? Can we do that? And dreams like this, let me tell you, if you work for the next 5-10 years, are achievable. Let's talk about yet another dream, heating and cooling. It is, today consumes 50% of world's energy, all over the world. And today is mostly fossil fuel. The question that we are asking, how do we, with the GHG emissions and the way the global warming is taking place, can we think of something totally different with our technology? And we have, fortunately, first of all, use only green electricity for heating and cooling, get rid of fossil fuel. Number two, use green electricity. This is something that all engineers know but doesn't really fully understand, that it is possible for us to get from 1 unit of electricity 5 or 8 or 9 units of heating and cooling by using Carnot cycle. I hope somewhere or other some of the fundamental engineering principles are taught in the institute. This institute also makes sure in the first year some of the courses, like you teach physics and chemistry and maths irrespective of what you do. Similarly, still a bit of thermodynamics and things like Carnot cycle, that how you can, from 1 unit of electricity, you can do 4 or 5 units of heating and cooling, and then develop all the thing and take it all over the world. And this is exactly what we are trying to do, and say we will take India to become the leader in something like this. Hydrogen to electricity. There is a lot of talk about it. Extremely expensive today. Once again, put together a set of people. We have knowledge, but we say objective has to be very clear, focused. That we want 50,000 rupees per kilowatt with 50% efficiency. Today efficiency are like 35-40%, cost is 1.5 lakhs. Now these are challenging, difficult problems, but can we, and we have to use AI in many of these things, solving these problems. But look at AI as a tool. Of course, don't want to get into the debate whether it will destroy the world or not destroy the world. I think human beings are quite capable of destroying the world. We don't need some other tool to do that. And today, the way what is happening in the world, if you see that, you will figure this out. Assistive technology and disability and geriatrics. Can we become the world leader in this area? We took up one little problem, and we are fairly focused on that. You know, in India, on the average district, roughly 5 children are born with hearing disability. Roughly 5 every week. Every week 5. In a year, you can just calculate 250 people or so. We are starting a program, and today we are starting this in Chennai, in Tamil Nadu and Karnataka, where within days of the child being born, we do 3 tests. First, we do a test where we simply do things like this and record the response and record it, digitize it. Digitizing is very important. This is something that this university is supposed to be very good. The UPI was all about digitizing payment. So digitize whether the per child is turning. And then there is something called OAE, which is today very expensive, but we want to bring down the cost to 10,000 rupees. Put it in every nurse's hand and see to it a measurement is done within a day or two. So that will tell, well, something is wrong. But that doesn't fully confirm, because sometime in a day or so. So in every district headquarters, we have another equipment called ABR, auditory brain stem response. Now, every district we have that, one. And then there are only 5 children every week. They can be taken to this and do the measurements. You do the measurements and then immediately act. There are 4 out of 5 children, all that they need is a good hearing aid. 1 out of 5 children, you need a cochlear implant. Today, these equipment are expensive, but that's where we can make a difference. We can make them extremely inexpensive and provide it to every child within 3 months. Why? Because just like we talk about AI models learn. Every child's brain is like a system like that, which learns. And learning takes place by vision, hearing, touch, and feel. If hearing is denied to a child, you are actually cutting off half the senses, and therefore brain development does not take place. Such an important thing. And can we not decide that in this country we will not let the young child lead them, but help them right in the first few months, first week? And this is something very doable. The cost is not that much. I have calculated the cost. Now, another important thing that I want to point out, and you are Dhirubhai Ambani University, you should be in the leadership. Never talk about technology without talking about its economics. You may not fully understand the economics when you are developing a new technology, but have a ballpark figure. Never separate technology from economics. So figure out, okay, how much will this cost, how much can be done, and we have estimated that if our technology development does take place in 2,500 crore per year, we can ensure that every child born in the country will have hearing. This is the kind of things that universities have to take lead. The institutes has to take lead, the startups has to do things, etc., etc. Cyber security is another area. We have recently formed the Indian Cyber Security Academic Network. Why did we do this? In fact, with Professor Ashok Jhunjhunwala, long back in 1987, we had formed a joint telematics group. And then we started a national conference on communication in rotation at 5 IITs, now many more IITs. It is that which really resulted in our communication push. And today, if companies like Tejas exist or others exist, it's because of this. So what we want to do, created an Indian Cyber Security Academic Network. Again, from across the institute, and I don't see names of Dhirubhai Ambani University, and I hope GV quickly gets us the name. And we are trying to sort of say, for cyber security, we cannot depend on anybody else. We will have our own technology. Everything we'll have. And in the next 5 years, we should be able to really get more. Otherwise, we are importing almost everything. So one part is the role of university. I could have gone on to many more topics. We are actually trying to do this in many other things. But I thought that I will turn around and move to something else. And this is important because it is the startups which play a very, very important role. And I will tell you about, like, for example, this is a young man. I met him, 25-year-old. He graduated from IIT Kanpur. He went to join Jaguar Land Rover, went to Europe, went to UK, was working in Bangalore a bit. Then he got bored and sort of said, well, this is anybody can do. He went back to IIT Kanpur, joined 3 of his classmates who were doing his PhD and formed a company and said, I want to take India to become a global leader in robotics. He's 26, 27, and he's determined. It doesn't matter whether he fails. They are people like that, and we need to find every such person who's determined and will make a difference. Another set of people, these people from Chandigarh University. When they were undergraduate, practically no teaching was going on. You had to only write exam and pass. And if you don't have any such thing, just go into all kinds of wrong things, bad habits. They said, no, we will try to make rockets. Inspired by Abdul Kalam, they said, we will make rockets ourselves. They struggled. They failed. In fact, one of the rockets that they tried to make, they failed 13 times. Any 19-year, 20-year-old person, 13 failures, they would have given up. They refused to give up. And today they have set up a company. And today they are making a 25,000 Newton rocket sitting in Delhi. We are helping them guide to that. Another set of people, this time from another unknown university. I don't even know the name of this university. They somehow got determined that they will try to do satellite, not rocket, but satellite propulsion. They found out that all satellite propulsion is highly toxic. They will make a non-toxic propellant. Looked impossible. After they graduated, they felt they haven't learned much. They tried to get into IIT, they couldn't get into IIT. They went to Madras Institute of Technology and joined MTech. Simply, and then they worked in places like Agnikul, internship in ISRO, determined, and today they are set up a company which is actually come up with a non-toxic propellant, and they are trying to scale it up. Yet totally, from our neighborhood, there is a youngster. First time when I met him, I didn't believe it. He went to, again, some unknown university in Gujarat, doing IT software. He did that IT software work. He was good at that for 2 years, but he was bored. Saying that what IT, so everybody is doing it, I am also doing it, and I will try to do something different. And what he did is that he said, I will pick up the hardware. Nobody builds hardware. What knowledge did he have? Nothing. But he had sufficient abilities, and then there is enough things on net. Fortunately, there are these lectures, NPTEL lectures. He went through them and he started. And today, he has set up a company. He's making some of the finest hardware systems with FPGA and other things. And say, I want to take India to be the leader. You know what happened? About 3 weeks back, he came to me and said that, sir, this whole thing about India becoming an industry which designs chips, etc., will never happen. Because we are not preparing for it. We just announce in Delhi and probably give large money to some big company. That is not enough. We need to really get students to be able to inspire students to be able to make, and startups to be able to make chips. And he came to me, I will work with you if you can convince somehow the government. And there is this semiconductor complex which I'm told that you people were helped set up in 80s but was burned down. But they still can make a 185 nanometer chips. Why can't we adopt that and open it up so that we will train any third-year student to be able to design a chip and actually get it fabricated in semiconductor complex at 5,000 rupees. Can we do this? And we have put down this program and we are trying to drive that. Now I'm giving you examples of some of them, and there are others. They are more in AI. I'm not going to talk much about it. I was told that there is an incubation already here. Since we have done incubation at IIT Madras Research Park and we have been very successful, I thought that I will end by talking a little bit about it. Incubator is not about setting up a space and say it is you will incubate, we will come and we'll give you money and you can set up a company. That's not what it is. Incubator, when a child is born, you don't just give them space and all. You actually have to do everything that a child requires. These 22-year youngsters who come to incubators actually need a lot of things if you really want to do this. We understood the whole process of what does incubation have to do? Create excitement, learn to build, reality check and incubate, prepare startup for long haul, multi-dimensional training, deep networking, mentoring and monitoring. One thing you miss and your incubation becomes unsuccessful. So I thought that I will briefly end by talking some of this. What do we do? First thing that we do, of course, go to different colleges and create excitement. That think of course, in Gujarat we don't have to do that because everybody anyway thinks of setting up a company rather than just employing. But create excitement, give talks about the successful entrepreneurs. The only point that I want to make that this will create startup, but very few startup emerge by just creating excitement. Many universities stop at that. The second thing that you need to do is learn to build. You know, when you are a child, your parents ask you to learn, study, you may not, and all that. They try to push you, doesn't get you anywhere. They get you a Lego tool. You start playing. Soon, children around will also come. Maybe they will put their own Lego blocks. And you're starting to play, but you're also starting to learn by building things. So we have one of the biggest mistakes that we have done in engineering in India, that we have forgotten that engineering is all about building. So we learn to build. Build anything, figure out, get materials, build anything. And in many colleges we have gone, and within a day or two we are able to get the same set of students, and they are starting to build. As they build, they feel good about themselves. You get them to build together, not individually. Get men and women, boys and girls to work together. Keep faculty out of that place. Because once the faculty comes, they think it is another classroom, and that's the end of it. You do that, and that will create excitement. But let me point out that this is an essential step, and yet plays only a starting role in creating a startup. Next, the youngster walk in. She may walk in and say, I want to start a company. What is my whole job? My job is to de-excite. I've already excited them, got them to build. Now I have to de-excite. Because very often they think, I'll become overnight successful and I can become big. That's a wrong thing. We need to bring down, and this huge success is not true. It's a very difficult career option. If you are not the strongest person, go and take up a job. Don't take that up because you will fail. No startup ever succeed without failure. Not once, they will fail multiple times. The persons will fail, fall, and do they know how to get up? That's the only question that we ask. How many times have you failed in the life? What did you do? If you learn to get up after failure, you will do this right. That's what we really look for. And then we go to the hard grind of, is your family dependent on you? For next 3 years, you'll get zero money. Can you survive with zero money? Or are there obligations? Have you taken a loan that you need to pay? Unfortunately, we are making this education also extremely expensive. So we need to really look at that. The other important slogan is easy funding hurts a startup. We think that startup is all about going within the fund. Easy funding hurts the startup. Be therefore very careful. We nurture them like a child, but we don't make. Small bits we may give here and there. And entrepreneur has to master all trade. Product idea plays a smaller role. Bigger role is, do you know how to build products, manage people? Do you know how to manage people? Do you know how to manage finance, access market, manufacture products which customers like, sell, make margins with each sell? All this, if you don't know, your entrepreneurship is not going to get anywhere. Training will therefore include a whole lot of different things. It's a multidimensional training. But let me tell you, it should be left open, not like a classroom teaching. That also doesn't work. Let them fail a few times, let them make mistakes. Let them make mistakes. When a child is walking and is about to fall, you don't stop the child from falling. If you keep stopping them, the child will never learn to walk. Same thing happens when you start learning cycle. You have to fall a few times before you can learn cycle. So I think entrepreneurship is also something like this. You need to do that. We need mentors, and preferably mentors themselves should be successful industrialists. No point saying, oh, I've worked for 20 years, but I've never been really driving the business myself. Things were all set up and I was only executing. That's different. But mentor plays extremely, extremely important role. If you're not able to find the right mentors, you'll never succeed. Then, startup and entrepreneurship is a very lonely journey. Immense stress. Create a network of them. There is also the support. And this is another very critical thing. They will go through downs and you need to be able to support them. If you are able to do them and then inculcate certain discipline. For example, we say, your startup, day one you set up a board. You find at least one independent person besides the founder. We'll also put one person in our with you. Every week, every month, on a fixed day, fixed hour, you'll have to have a meeting. Thursday, 2 p.m. First Thursday, 2 p.m. You will have to have board meeting. In board meeting also we tell you what will you do. First slide should be what went well, what did not go well, what went so-so. Summarize. Look at the last month's minutes, see the action taken. Then straight away put financials. Balance sheet, P&L, cash flow, payables, receivables, what is this? Well, they don't know, doesn't matter. Let them put blank. Let them learn about, these are the 5 most important things. Balance sheet, profit and loss statement, cash flow, payables and receivables. You start doing it monthly, you will start learning what is going right, what is going wrong. The third slide can be product update, R&D, development, manufacturing and development, sales, the sales funnel. Putting on every line of sales funnel a probability. And next month coming back and checking, you have put 80% probability. What happened to that? Track. Tracking is extremely important. And HR, how are you managing people? How are you don't have money. How do you keep them? How do you, if you don't, and finally compliance, tax, HR filings, and all those things. Again, some places are weak, but these are extremely critical. You can't make a successful startup if you don't learn to do these things right. Well, I don't want to get on and on. I want to again point out the easy funding first. Give money in bits and pieces. Because very often we have reduced the incubation to just funding. That you are spraying, occasionally something may happen. But really if you want to nurture, you need to really make a difference. Well, I want to end. India is a stage where we can take leadership. That part is true. Particularly in last 40 years. I mean, I came back to India in 1981 and I've seen the kind of change, particularly from 1991 onwards, but pretty much from 81 onwards, we've been moving forward. And today India is at the stage to take leadership. If we do it right and not just create slogans. R&D and startups have a major role to play. And Dhirubhai Ambani University have to play a role in this. I hope that's what you will do for the next 10, 15 years. Thank you very much. I have finished a few minutes earlier, so if there are some quick questions, I'm willing to answer. Anybody can raise. Yes, speak loud. I can't hear you. भाई साहब सुनाई नहीं दे रहा है. हाँ, यहाँ आगे आ जाइए.
इंडिया के कुछ जर्नल्स जो हैं जो सिर्फ Q1 लेवल पे हैं. मैथमेटिक्स का एक भी जर्नल Q1 लेवल में नहीं है और मेनी साइंस ओनली मेडिकल के छोड़ के और कुछ फिलॉसफी के.
हाँ, journals is an important Indian publication. Indian journals is important. I could have talked about it. But today I decided to talk about moving away from publication and even patents, but actually startup. So we can do you have my email ID in case you don't take a card from me, write to me, I will talk to you about that. Any other question? Anybody? Comment, question? Yes? Yes. Yeah.
Do humanities or non-technological disciplines have a role to play in the startup, excepting preaching moral values and sounding the alarm every time?
Thank you. I think no startup ever succeeds by just technology. Technology, management, legal, and every discipline plays a role. We have had many people from humanities joining many of these startups. If you do not create a rounded group, and if you think that because you have a social science degree you won't understand technology, that's all nonsense. They will understand. It is a group which makes a company successful. The leadership group has to have strong background in humanities and maybe some people who have a humanities degree.
Yes, sir. Myself, I am Professor Ritu here. I teach in the domain of basic electronics to nano electronics. I research and do projects. We have done sponsored project also, myself and my group. Now the problem is, sir, we develop prototypes for military application also we have developed. And then we visited the military site and all. But now, every year new students, every semester comes, we start with a fresh project as per their interest. And many applications, they just lie, in the hardware boxes in the office. I also had started a company with an intention to contribute to the society, but then, it's another level of gain, sir. And being, a full-time faculty, and it is hard to, so I just need some inputs from a person like you. That can we think or just stop and do projects and projects?
Okay.
It's really messed up. Yeah.
Thank you. I think for a stronger advice, you can connect with me. Take my email ID. Actually, my email ID was there. If you did not, ashok@tenet.res.in, but I will give you my email ID. One thing that probably you have not done. Whenever you even make a prototype, you need to, and you want to take it to the market, you need to ask questions. Does the product that I have made, is it needed by somebody? Is somebody willing to pay for it? How much is the person willing to pay? And what functionalities they will minimum need? With the money that they are willing to pay, can I make margins? Can I make my cost much lower, including sales and marketing? The basic economics, we in electrical engineering, so I am also from electrical engineer, very often we don't do. We just do projects without understanding the basic economics, without understanding the market. And then of course, the next question that I will ask is, will the product work 24/7? Is the product manufacturable? All these are questions that one has to learn. I remember learning these things.
We do, sir.
I remember learning these things from 80s onwards. I'll tell you a little story and stop with that. When I joined IIT Madras in 1981, and one of the things that I saw that there was practically zero industry-academia interaction. So I started visiting industry and getting to know. It was not so easy, but somehow if you are determined, you can go there. And then an incident happened. I was asked to give a lecture, I don't remember, some institute of engineers or something, in the city, and I was young, 30-year-old, not even 30 probably, and bold, didn't fully understand everything, and I gave a talk in which I said, see, Indian industry always imports everything, and that will not get us anywhere. And I took an example of one of the company called WS Industries. Say they make this power line carrier communication equipment. They actually import all the components at 80,000 rupees and then try to sell the fully assembled, tested equipment at 95, 97. Hardly make much money, and that's what is going on. Then I went on to say that if they gave me 1 lakh rupees, I will be able to develop the complete technology for that product. for a single piece. Now, I probably, a young person, small, academic kind of seminar, I made that statement without thinking. Some person in the media was there who wrote down this, and in the next day in Indian Express, a small column said that this is what Jhunjhunwala said. And promptly I get a call from the chairman of WS Industries. I was now worried. I shouldn't have used the name. But anyway, I went there and he asked me several questions. So how do you make it? What does it require? I understand the theory. I have never made anything, but I know what has to be done. And I explained to him. And he says, in 1 lakh rupees, you will be able to do this? I said, I think so. He took out a checkbook, wrote a check of 1 lakh. I don't know how he did that, because that same thing will cost 1 crore rupees. Will somebody really do this to a young person, 30-year-old, a professor in IIT? What credibility do they have? But he did that. But the story doesn't end here. So how do I go about doing it? I've never done it. I bought a bunch of young undergraduate students. That's all that I had at that time. Some 9 of them started working on this. 1 year we worked hard. We had somebody from WS Industries interfacing, and we were able to make a prototype which was working quite well on the table. But every morning it will not work. We have to go and bang it here, bit and this, make a few things, and it will work. But certainly we had not even understood how much will it cost. It was certainly not 24/7. It was not going to become productionizable. But the chairman called me, says our year is getting over. Can I come and see the work? I was very worried. I'm going to get real into trouble. But I couldn't stop him, so he came. He saw this. I thought that he would be very angry. But he says, very good. Can I take this with me? I said, sir, it is not productionizable. I'm not even done value engineering. It barely functions. Can I take this? I say, you are paid for it. How can I deny that? He says, okay, this evening my people will come and take this. I had another set, I kept working a bit, but money was also, I had spent much of the money. 2 months passed, fortunately, I was thinking that somewhere or other, hit will come, but it didn't come. Two months passed, suddenly I got a call from his office saying that chairman wants you to come this morning and also have lunch with us. So I went there. When I go there, he was sitting in a room with 3 other people from Canada. As soon as I went in, he got up and welcomed me and started telling me, this is Professor Jhunjhunwala, he came back from US and he's doing this, doing that. He actually told a whole lot of things which is highly inflated, but I was not really about me. And then he told them that this person, I was taking this technology from you, this product from you, you people were selling me 80,000 rupees. This person has now designed it and it cost only 30,000 rupees and is ready for production. And then he took them along with me and walked into a big room where in the middle of this place there was a table on which there was a glass case. He removed the glass case and our prototype was there. The prototype was fortunately working. Now these Canadian gentlemen start asking me questions. Fortunately, they asked me questions largely about what is the principle, what did you do, what are you doing. So all those things I could easily answer. They asked me a couple of questions of where are you sourcing some components, that also I answered. Well, we had lunch, he kept talking big about me, mostly untruth, and he honored me in there. And he had a shawl and something, and then he sent me away. I couldn't fully understand, except I got a call in the evening. My interface person in the industry told me that those Canadians have reduced the cost from 80,000 rupees to 27,000 rupees. This was my first industry academia experience, and I often wonder, did I succeed? Did I fail? The volume went up 5 times. He started selling at 60,000 rupees. Country gained. His company made huge amount of money. He had betted on me. He got fair return. Did I succeed or did I fail? He went one thing, did one thing more. He went about, started talking about me to all other industrialists. And I started getting call after call that can you do this and do that. So there is a journey involved. Their first product is extremely important. You need to get there. After that, nothing will stop you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor, for your insightful and inspiring speech, and I'm sure all of us have a lot more questions, but we'll take few of the questions in the panel discussion also. So now we'll break for tea, and please rejoin us after that for the rest of the keynote addresses.
Hello everyone, we'll resume our session now. So just an announcement, there has been an email shared with you, with the faculty and the students yesterday with a link where you can share the questions which you have for the speakers. So if you have any questions, please do share those questions on the link, and our student volunteers can then write and share it with the speaker later on in the question and answer round. So now I'd like to invite Jainil to introduce our next keynote speaker.
Hello everyone. Now I would like to introduce Shri Ramkumar Ramamoorthy. Shri Ramkumar Ramamoorthy is a seasoned business leader and academician with over 35 years of experience across IT services, technology consulting, and higher education. Formerly the chairman and managing director of Cognizant India, he played a pivotal role in scaling the company's operations in India across 13 cities and over 220,000 full-time employees. Post-Cognizant, he was the Pro-Vice Chancellor of Professional Learning at Creia University, giving shape to interwoven learning across liberal arts and management disciplines. Currently, he serves as a partner at Catalinks, advising high-growth tech companies, and is a member of the MICA Governance Council, a former president of the 189-year-old Madras Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and Vice Chairman of AMC HAM India. He has been actively engaged in shaping India's digital economy and the educational ecosystem through his leadership roles at NASSCOM, CII, AICTE, MICA, Chennai Mathematical Institute, Xavier Institute of Management, among others. Shri Ramamoorthy brings a unique blend of corporate insight, academic innovation, and ecosystem foresight, making him a respected voice in India's knowledge economy. Please welcome Shri Ramkumar Ramamoorthy, sir.
Good morning, and thanks for this opportunity. I think I should consider myself fortunate to share the dais with some of the distinguished minds
in the industry as well as in academia. I grew up admiring what Ajit Balakrishnan had done with rediff.com, and it's indeed a fortunate moment to actually meet him in person and share the stage with him today. From the introduction, you would have realized that I've spent considerable years in the corporate world, and what I'm going to present today is largely a perspective as a recruiter, as someone who has worked with the #1 private employer in the country and the #2 private employer in the country, Tata Consultancy Services and Cognizant. I consciously tweaked the topic to introduce at scale, reimagining higher education at scale in the age of AI, because I strongly believe that solutions to problems in India will have to be at scale, and they cannot be at the fringes. Any transformation, any major structural change that we want to bring about in the country will have to reach the last mile in society.
It just cannot be
in islands, or nor can we
continue to adopt some of the standards, structures, templates that have been defined by the Western world. And anything that we do should ideally be indigenous, if not at least something that captures the culture and the ethos of India.
Rather than, as someone said, grow daffodils on Indian soil.
I wanted to use the presentation largely to bring up a couple of graphics, just to drive home the kind of structural changes that have happened in the marketplace and how the educational system in India adapted to some of these structural changes over the last 20, 30 years. If you look at the shifts in the technology landscape, especially the enterprise technology stack, you realize that we have seen waves, or what we call S-curves, over the last 3 or 4 decades. We had the mainframe era, the mini-computer era, the distributed computing era, the internet era, and the digital era. And today, if you were to probably look at digital, we have thrown in a lot of stuff under digital, the entire kitchen sink, and we call it digital. There are 2 very broad trends that played out during this period. One, if you look at up until internet, these are all single technologies that actually impacted that era. And we also had long periods of stability after the single technology. So once the mainframe era happened, there are at least about 10 or 15 years for everybody to adapt and adjust to this technology. Not just the corporate world, but also the academic world. So we were able to transition, adapt, scale, and get ready for the next wave. But that's not the case with digital. Today it's a confluence of technologies, not driven by a monolithic technology. And second, there is no stability. There is continuous change. It's a period of agility. And if you are not going to adapt to this agile world, very quickly you could become obsolete. You could become irrelevant. And that's the big shift that we are seeing, not just in organizations, but also with respect to educational institutions. So if you look at this particular slide, you realize that it's not that the S-curve ended at a particular point in time, and then the next S-curve actually started. There is an overlap period. And it is in this overlap period that we have seen value being created or value being destroyed. And this is applicable across industries. And if you were to go back and then look at a few examples, 2 of the best known companies in the world came about within a period of 12 months, Microsoft and Apple. Between 94 and 98, we had Yahoo, we had eBay, we had Google, we had Rediff.com, which came about in 96, our own Yahoo. So these are a cluster of companies that come about almost at the same time during that overlap period. I was just reading up something about robotic wealth management this morning. I didn't realize that Charles Schwab, Vanguard, Fidelity, some of the biggest of the big names in the financial services world, they're all being disrupted by 2 or 3 very small companies that came about the same year in 2008 called Wealthfront and Betterment. So across industries, we do have this happening. And I strongly believe that both corporate India, enterprises across the world, and the educational ecosystem, we are currently in this phase. Because we are so close to it, we are in it. We are not able to extricate ourselves and look at it from outside. And which is the reason why there are certain choices that we will have to make as individuals and enterprises in order to gain the exit velocity and get on to the next curve. And if you don't get on to the next curve, then obviously you know what is going to happen. In that context, let me tell you a few thoughts on reimagining higher education in the context of AI. I think AI has become a very powerful force. I know earlier during the introduction, Professor mentioned that there are some people who believe that AI can have catastrophic effects, and some believe that AI is only a tool. I believe AI is way beyond being a tool. Fine, it's a structural force that's impacting all of us. Look at the last 100, 150 years of the educational landscape. We have had 3 or 4 major challenges. Challenge number 1 is how do we drive education at scale? The scale problem exists even today. can we probably replicate what Prof Jhunjhunwala said, all the examples that he gave from IIT Research Park? Can we take it to every single pin code in India wherever there is an education institution? Probably not. IIT Madras and a few other institutions are still pockets. They are still islands in the educational ecosystem in India. Can we replicate stuff at scale? What UPI has done to India, we are struggling to even adopt that for the next one. After UPI, we have had account aggregators, we have had ONDC, we had unified lending interface. All these newer opportunity waves aren't getting adopted the way UPI got adopted. So one is the scale problem. Fine, in India. Along with scale comes personalization. Can I take a one-size-fit-all and then take it everywhere? Or can I tailor it to the needs of individuals, the learning needs of individuals, purely based on the learning gap, the pace of learning, the style of learning, so on and so forth, which has been one big problem. The second big problem has been the teacher-student ratio. Do we have enough teachers in the country? Some people talk about 30:1, 35:1. I don't want to debate those. But I think it's well accepted that we don't probably have the required number of teachers. More importantly, we don't have the required number of motivated teachers. And are teachers adequately motivated? Do they walk into the class and sensitize the students to what's happening around us? That's the second problem. The third big problem, of course, is inclusion. Fine, if you're wealthy, you can make the investment, you have the right to education. If you're a disadvantaged, disabled, if you're studying in multiple languages, languages become a serious barrier. And finally, learning outcomes. Fine, everybody seems to be very happy with the input, nobody seems to be happy with the outcome. All these four problems, I strongly believe, AI can play a very critical role in reimagining India's higher education. And that's the beauty of AI. AI is not going to be a silver bullet. It's not going to be a panacea of all the problems that we have in society. But AI can probably be a great enabler, can be a great catalyst to address some of these challenges that India has. I just have 6 points or 8 points. I'll quickly go over them in the interest of time and then hand it over to the next speaker. I've been saying this for the last 15 years, that this affiliating system of education, where you have one university, which affiliates several hundred colleges, and the university is itself obsolete. Fine, you're multiplying that obsolescence, fine, based on the number of institutions that are affiliated to that university. I think we first need to get over this, because at one point in time we needed them. It came about for a certain purpose. If the university is well established, right curriculum, right pedagogy, right assessment rubrics, then you can multiply it positively. But unfortunately today I strongly believe that multiplying it negatively. If you do not get the university right, all the affiliated colleges are also impacted in the process. This worked when we wanted standardization at scale. Remember the S-curves? The mainframe era, the client server era, those are all standard stuff that you could probably send out. But today it's the innovation era. Fine, from standardization to scale, if you want excellence at scale and innovation at scale, I think we just need to rip off this affiliated system of education in the country. The national education policy wants to do it in 15 years. I think we should do it in 15 months. There is no reason for the affiliated system of education to continue in India. And I'm going to throw a question at you. Do you know how many countries in the world actually have the affiliated system of education? 4. Yeah. I didn't expect a professor to answer that question. There are only 3 countries which have embraced this in a meaningful fashion. One is India. Guess who the other 2 are? That's the reason I said I'll discount the 4th one, because they are also moving away. The 2 other countries are Pakistan and Bangladesh. Is that the company that we want to keep with and reimagine higher education? Fine. It's almost like the Model T of education, right? If I were to use the automotive language. When Ford introduced cars, they introduced a few bread boxes. But today we want a Tesla version of it, where education, you can, if there is a change in the marketplace, the software gets automatically downloaded. You still can't go and then crank up stuff the way you probably did in the Ford context. So I think to drive innovation at scale, allow autonomous status, try and then create as many independent institutions, give them the empowerment to do what is right for society. Second, orient the faculty. Some of you tracking the media, you realize that I have been a little vocal the last 1 week in the context of my former employer laying off 12,000 people. Fine, it's arguably one of the best run companies in the world, not just in India. For 50 years, this company didn't resort to what they did today. But they suddenly believe that the middle management and the senior management, they are not relevant anymore in the marketplace. And if these individuals were to continue, they will contaminate even those who are below them. Recency is extremely critical. How many of our faculty are recent? How many of them can stand up and come and give a lecture on the impact of AI on higher education? Simple. I'm not taking off on faculty, this is not payback time. Fine, but I'm just asking a very genuine question. Are we adequately equipped with the tools and the frameworks to stay relevant in a society that's changing at a velocity that we have never seen before? That agility, that velocity. I'll come to that in a minute. Maybe I'm sure that GB has a few questions during the panel. Third, establish deeper linkages with the industry. The most important thing is, earlier, I think Prof Jhunjhunwala covered this exceptionally well, where ideas came about in the academic context and commercialization of those ideas happened in the industry. Today, innovation is happening in the industry, not as much in academia. So if there is so much innovation that's happening in the industry, academia is scrambling to catch up with it, especially in the context of AI, in the context of, I think one of the finest examples is what happened during COVID, right? Earlier, if you have to develop a drug, it will take you about 10 years to develop a drug in the lab of a pharmaceutical company, and 5 years to commercialize it. You first do the discovery at the R&D, then clinical trials, then manufacturing, then sales and marketing. We crunched those 10 years into less than probably about 10 months. The drug was made available in the marketplace in 10 months. Fine. All that is possible largely because of the linkages that companies have had. If you go back and look at every single item that I mentioned here, Moderna has a very interesting case study. You know, they used a very different platform called mRNA platform to launch their drug. You would find everything listed here. Find the computing power on the cloud, the analytics that they had to probably do to get the discovery out, the gene mutation analysis, the artificial intelligence that they had to probably use, the IoT structures that they had to probably use to print, to manufacture the drug across multiple companies, multiple countries from a single machine where they probably provided the input. So a lot of innovation today is happening in the industry. And if you don't probably have deep linkages in the industry, I would argue in the age of AI, you would probably need as many people from the industry as from academia if you have to grab this opportunity. Some elements of that is happening today in the marketplace, but I would still believe that these are more tokenism than anything that is structural. I could see at least people in the first row, many of them are from the industry. Fine. Ambassador Tirumurthy is associated with IIT Madras. GV is associated with IIT Madras. Rajesh Gopinathan, after he stepped down from TCS, joined IIT Mumbai. Sure. Ajit has had 2 or 3 terms, I don't know how long. He was the chairman of the governing board of IIM Calcutta, so on and so forth. I think people have contributed, but these are all still early indicators of industry participating in academia. I became extremely controversial by making a statement in a closed room. I hope there's no media here. Video cameras are good enough to be a media house. Fine. In Singapore and some other countries, after you do your education, you will have to probably spend some time in military service before you could probably be deployed in the corporate world or do anything that you want to. I was joking to somebody that, hey, look, we have so many experts, exceptionally good talent in the industry. And these days, people retire in their 40s and 50s. They don't even wait to retire at 60. Is there a way by which we can probably get many of these guys as professors of practice back into the industry, back into the campuses? So I was jovially telling them that, hey, maybe you should hold back PF for a year or gratuity for a year and tell them once they complete that 1 year program, like military service, they can start participating. Or at least have an incentive to tell them that you'll probably get a 0.25% additional interest if you probably do it. That's in a lighter vein, okay? That's not the headline for tomorrow. Whether it's research, a lot of money is spent in industry today towards research, today consulting, infrastructure. And unless you're going to probably work side by side, I know when Cognizant expanded in Coimbatore, we didn't have grade A commercial real estate in Coimbatore. We took some land in Kumaraguru College of Technology and incubated our operations within that particular university's campus. Honeywell has done this exceptionally well in the Tyagaraja College of Engineering campus in Madurai. I strongly believe that in the years to come, you probably need industry to come and then thrive. But you guys are at a great disadvantage. You have the entire city to yourself, GIFT City, to participate in. But I think it's extremely important that we need to co-locate industries with academic institutions if you want to make this happen. And finally, these are some of the thoughts around the structure of higher education. AI is just not for engineering. AI is for everything. Find the impact that AI is making on law, on medicine, on humanities, on social sciences is unthinkable. So unless we get every single discipline to appreciate what AI can do to them and to embed in the curriculum, embed in pedagogy, embed in assessments, I think we will not be in a position to reimagine higher education. One additional thought on the culture. On the structure, yes, those are some of the things that we had to do, right from dismantling or dissolving the affiliating system, right down to embedding AI across all disciplines of study. Creativity, critical thinking, cognitive agility, and collaboration. I think these four will stand out in the age of AI when it comes to higher education. A lot of the stuff that we do, I spent a little over 25 years between TCS and Cognizant, right? In just 3 quarters, the CEOs of these companies are saying their productivity in software coding, in programming, has gone up from 20% to 30% in 3 quarters. So that's the impact that AI can have just on programming, on coding. And there is one industry which is greatly exposed relative to several other industries. You'll probably find this applicability in varying degrees. So look at this, right? I think someone alluded to it, maybe it was Professor Shurat who probably said this in his introductory comments. I think AI is going to release all the cache from our C drive and D drive. Stuff which are very repetitive, such stuff which only have a knowledge base that you can probably gain access to at any point in time. And it's going to release so much space in your brain that you can start thinking more creatively. Fine, we were using the brain for probably a lot of wrong reasons. Now that additional space is going to be cleared, that you can probably put it to innovation, creativity. At the end of the day, any job that's going to be people first, that has to do with human innovation, ingenuity, are the jobs that are going to stay. Fine, AI cannot take some of these jobs. Critical thinking, fine, and judgment, that's extremely critical. Fine, I think Professor Surat said we debated extensively whether this has to be a polytechnic or whether this has to be an engineering institution. That's a judgment call. These judgment calls cannot be left to systems. Cognitive ability, fine, reasoning. And it's no longer just logical reasoning, but also data reasoning. When data is thrown at you, fine, how do you interpret the data and take judgment calls, and finally collaboration. I strongly believe that there's something that the academic institutions aren't doing enough. When GV and I, we were having an offline conversation over a cup of tea. One of the finest courses in business analytics that was created in the last 3 years in India is 3 institutions coming together in the eastern part of India. IIM Calcutta, ISI, and IIT Kharagpur, where they said if there are going to be 3 components to business analytics and AI, the management component is best addressed by IIM Calcutta. The mathematics, statistics, the probability component is best addressed by ISI. And the programming and all the other technical is best addressed by IIT Kharagpur. So students actually do a semester in each of these 3 colleges, and then they have a final capstone or project to take it and then complete it. Embrace transdisciplinary learning. This is the biggest challenge that we have. We have boxed everybody in. Up until recently, we only had computer science. Now we have computer science specialization in AI, specialization in 3D printing, specialization in data analytics. We actually need to embrace beyond STEM. Engineering and anthropology, mathematics and music, fine, sociology and physics. Now, I think we really need to move the boundaries, and some of these are possible only through collaboration and through transdisciplinary learning. I gave you the example of Moderna. Do you know people from how many disciplines of study actually came together to come up with the drug for COVID? They published it. There's some 16 or 17 disciplines of study. Clinicians, pharmacists, biostatisticians, mathematicians, engineers, marketeers, fine, manufacturers, so on and so forth. People who completely understood the supply chain, because in that context, you don't jab the last person in a mountain, the whole damn stuff is going to come back at you, right? So, interdisciplinary learning is going to be extremely critical in the context of AI, and I think institutions will have to rethink it. There's human intelligence, I think. It skipped a bullet. Fine. Promote entrepreneurial thinking. This is extremely critical in today's context, because people, you're moving away from a knowledge era to an era of imagination. Go back to creativity, critical thinking, cognitive agility, etc., right? Knowledge is no longer power, because a ChatGPT will fetch the knowledge for you. Fine, at the click of a button. Earlier, people were talking about T-shaped skills, right? Where they said, hey, you probably need generic skills and you also have to specialize very deeply. I was at a lecture, I think Ambassador Tirumurthy was also there, by Sriram Raghavan, talking about artificial intelligence, who was the vice president of AI at IBM. And he was talking about, there was a question from the audience where someone asked me what type of skills are needed. He said, deep specialization will probably be aided by AI. What you need is that generic ability to connect the dots. Fine? So, the top band of the T is extremely important. The deep knowledge, you can be aided and assisted by AI and some of those tools. Rethink assessment beyond exams. This is a big topic for debate and discussion. We go and then hire, as an industry, the IT services industry has hired from probably every engineering college in the country. And then we put them through training for 6 months. Why do we even have to do this? Fine. It's not that education institutions will have to tailor students to a particular company, but even the foundational stuff. The problem is with assessment. The assessment is done off learning and not for learning. You assess what individuals have learned. You don't assess them for their gaps and what interventions are needed to enable them to learn better and become relevant in the marketplace. So the shift from assessment of learning to assessment for learning on a continuous basis, I think is extremely critical. And a lot of the stuff which are more human-centered, I think it's a great opportunity for us to make humans more human using AI. Find the innate capabilities of human beings. I don't think we are using that to our potential. We have been sub-optimized because of a lot of other interventions that have come our way. I think it's a huge opportunity for us to clear the cache and allow human beings to be more human. And I think it was Professor Surat who said, fine, it's not worth living a life which is controlled by machines and by AI. Fine, it's those quirks in individuals. I think he used the word wickedness. I'll probably sober it down a bit. So some of those quirks that are the jugad, fine, that we are all known for, I think we need to preserve and we need to protect. I'll end with making just one statement. I didn't realize that Professor Jhunjhunwala is going to use this earlier, but I would leave this thought with you. Professor Sadagopan, who was the director of IIIT in Bangalore, fine, once wrote an article about 10 years back. I think he's used this headline on 2 or 3 occasions. And then he titled that article on when will India be an uploading nation? He kept asking, we seem to be downloading everything from the Western world. You want your research documents, your standards, fine, anything that you want. We seem to be extremely happy as a nation of downloaders. When will we become an uploading nation? UPI was a fantastic example where we developed something homegrown and contributed to the world. I strongly believe that AI gives us that opportunity because AI has democratized a lot of things. You don't really need the level of finances to run AI. The computational capability will be made available. Right? You don't really know those mathematical or algorithmic formulas. I think that's something that will probably become quite commonplace. It's our ingenuity, our innovation, the human capital. Find the critical thinking, the mind of the individual, which is going to be a huge differentiator. And I think AI has given us that opportunity. It's for us to make the best of it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your invaluable insights. We'll now open the floor for questions. So if anyone in the audience.
At the risk of sounding a bit of a nuisance, Mr. Ramamoorthy, 2 very brief questions to you. First, you mentioned the obsolescence of knowledge. That I believe you really meant information, not knowledge as such, because knowledge requires rigor and imagination to become knowledge. Otherwise, knowledge would not have been knowledge. Second is an operational question. We at our institute are currently engaged with the language barrier. You mentioned the language barrier that is coming way. Nobody questions the competence of our students. They're very good, but they cannot put their problems or to potential recruiters. So we are very capable people on the faculty. They are all. I know that there's a lot of it on the market, but supposing we were to explore the possibility of a particular module suited to our students. I mean, one size fits all will not do for management students as well as for students of specializing in disciplines offered by our university. Can we reach out to you and, to borrow your phrase, at velocity, so that we have an assurance of a quick response rather than wait for it? I don't mean a solution, but a response that you are considering a solution to help us. That's what I wanted to appeal to. Can we reach out to you in that case with a proposal, a module or something? Thank you very much.
So I think there is a transformation or a transition that's happening from knowing to thinking. Just because you know something, it's no longer a competitive advantage, because the other person also has access to that knowledge. Fine. So the competitive advantage that you had up until a few years back, today has become a competitive parity. Fine. I wouldn't say it's absolves. Fine, if I said it, I correct it. But it's no longer a competitive advantage. You may have certain experience to color that knowledge, fine, based on your exposure. But I think the real shift that's happening in the market is twofold. One is from knowing to thinking. Second is from doing to getting the systems to do it for you. I think these two shifts are going to be extremely critical in the months and years to come. Because not everything will have to be reinvented and done by yourself. There is enough material that's available in the marketplace. I had a very funny designation about 15 years back. I was a chief knowledge officer at Cognizant. Fine. So take it with a pinch of salt. Fine, where we probably felt that the biggest competitive differentiator that the company had was the knowledge assets that we had created. The data, the context, the culture, the emotions that went into creating it. And very quickly you realize that the knowledge about that particular subject, even if it were a competitive advantage, it has a certain window of time. Very quickly the next person will grab it and perhaps even do better than you. So rather than get into this, whether it's information, whether it's knowledge, fine, whether it's subject matter expertise, etc., anything that you probably think is an advantage today will be made available. And you can fetch that stuff fairly quickly using the queries that you probably post. In fact, the questions that he asked today, the way you structure it, is what is going to give you the kind of results that you need. That knowledge base is available, it's become equitable. Anybody can query using that infinite knowledge base, which is quite vast. Fine, it's not that when you use ChatGPT, the question that you ask, ChatGPT gives you a very different response relative to your neighbor asking the same question. So that access to knowledge. So earlier there was a saying, McKinsey, someone said, why do people not share something that is competitive? They said it's competitive advantage not to share. But today it's not competitive advantage not to share. Fine, because a deep seek will find it for you. Yeah, and thankfully I don't have a corporate job today, so there's some part of my cache has been cleared.
My question is regarding the thoughts which you were expressing for higher education in the era of AI. What I thought is, whether it is in the AI or not, higher education, the thoughts which you expressed can be best met if the foundation is good. For the foundations to be good, you have to have the basic primary education or the school education the best, with the best teachers around. So if that problem is solved, in my opinion, whether it is AI or without AI, the higher education can be greatly improved. What is your thought on this?
No, I entirely agree with you, but at some stage we should stop passing this buck, right? Fine. Then primary education, then secondary education will say it's middle school, then they'll say it's primary education, then they'll probably say it's daycare. Then there's no end to this.
I can actually say that European countries, they offer the free education, even for the higher education. But what I was trying to say is that even if you give free education and the best primary education, that problem can be solved.
No, I agree. See, unfortunately, we will have to make do with what is available on the plate, right? Fine, and there are certain countries in Europe where people pay 51% taxes. Are we willing to pay 51% taxes to probably provide their education? So I think, see, and they're also dealing with very small numbers. In Finland, I've studied the Finnish education system very closely. Studied the Korean vocational education system very closely, given that, especially the state of Tamil Nadu, we have a lot of Korean companies. And the kind of skilling programs that they bring to the table, they are very different. Germany, find their entire vocational system of education, which is the only thing I changed from the email that I got from the Director General was app scale. Fine. I think the topic is, you can reimagine and you can probably create another IIT Mumbai, you can create another IIIT in Bangalore. That doesn't solve India's problem. India's problem is, unless you address it at scale and at the unit cost which is affordable to an Indian, we are not going to reimagine higher education in India. You can reimagine higher education in Dhirubhai Ambani University. You can reimagine higher education in this pin code. But that doesn't satisfy India's needs. Maybe one last question will be interesting.
Namaste, sir. I am Hardik from the MSIT program. First of all, thank you for your valuable insights. My question is, do you think that tools like GPT or any other models, students might be losing their cognitive ability or ability to think? Because the recent study from the MIT shows that there is loss of, brain and neural engagement from 79 to 47%. And how can we overcome this, or any university can overcome this?
I don't have an answer to that. See, at the end of the day, human ingenuity is infinite. I don't want to put a number to it to say that, hey, if you probably use it at this hour, X number of times, the power of the competence will actually come down. There are enough studies that are written. Please ensure that some of these technologies are used as a catalyst. They're not just a tool. They're a catalyst. Today, I could have created this presentation in 20 seconds talking to a couple of tools, Dali and Napkin. It would have just created the presentation for me. I don't even need to go on them. Am I better off? I could have used much better graphics. Right? They will throw everything to me. Tomorrow, I don't know whether you probably need to use MS PowerPoint. Fine. Today, Google is worried that their search engine could potentially be taken over by Perplexity's Comet. Fine, because they have integrated AI into a browser. Where the minute you probably go there, you talk to the browser, it will do everything and also some base level tasks. It will calendarize, it will probably schedule, it could do a whole host of things. So try and then see what you can use to better you as an individual. Free up that space, that grunt job that you don't like to do. Fine. And that gives you enough space for you to think about something new, something very, very creative. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now I'd like to request Sanya to introduce our next keynote speaker. I know you all have a lot of questions, but we'll be taking up most of the questions in the panel discussion also.
I would like to introduce Sri Ajit Balakrishnan, who is an Indian entrepreneur, business executive and administrator. He started his entrepreneurial venture with Redifuse, an advertising firm which he co-founded when he was 22. He is the founder and the current chairman emeritus of Rediff.com, an internet company based in Mumbai. He was chairman of the board of governance of IIM Calcutta for 2 5-year terms ending in March 2017. He served as the chairman of the Government of India, Ministry of Information Technology, Working Group on Internet Governance and Proliferation. He regularly writes a column in Business Standard exploring technology, economics and public policy.
I don't have any slides, so I will speak directly. All this discussion today, I hope you can hear me right at the back. Okay, it all reminds me of one or two things of my life, on how people perceive technology and what happens. When I graduated from IIM Calcutta in 1971, I went to Bombay to start Rediffusion. And at that time, Bombay had about 80 textile mills. Okay, 80 textile mills, and daily, that was in the middle of the magazine boom, so magazine covers would be full of the daughters' pictures of these glamorous textile owners. I can see many heads, we all remember it. Newspaper ads will be full of these names of the ones who own this. And then suddenly, the next year after I got to Bombay, some strikes started happening in textile mills. Labor strikes. And in the 1 or 2 years, the main name coming to the forefront of this strike is a man called Dr. Datta Samant. So everyone said Datta Samant is breaking down the mills, cry, 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 etc. And there was no other news but this every day in the Bombay newspapers. Finally, by around 1981 or 82, there was one unstoppable strike lasting nearly 200 days, and all the 60 to 80 textile mills closed down. Now today, even if you go back and research all this on the internet and read history books, you ask, why did this happen? And the first thing people will say, Datta Samant and the bad unions brought it down. Now if you really think a little more deeply as to what happened during the time was, Bombay textile mills were doing purely cotton textiles, spinning and weaving cotton textiles, and they were seen to be a great wealth creator. Suddenly polyester cotton appeared. Okay? And all of us in the early 70s would never be seen in any cotton trousers. Unless you wore polyester cotton, you are not a fashionable person. My sister used at that time was going to start a school and college, and she told her parents, I will not wear cotton saris. So we all asked, why, what's wrong? He said, only old women wear cotton saris. She wanted to wear polyester cotton. So the decline and crash of the textile mills was with the rise of synthetic fiber. But even today, if you go back, you can research it today itself. Nobody quite owns up to the fact that something happened as an invention, and there are social consequences to that. You must interpret it correctly. I brought this example up because today people say AI, oh God, what's going to happen, etc., etc. I hope we will have the sense and imagination to steer through this crisis a little carefully. I'll give you one more example, and this is a famous example. When somebody called a struggling lawyer in Bombay became known as the Mahatma. Okay? Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi was invited to go to Champaran by some people, and he had just come back from Africa, so he wanted to help people out. And also, not often stated, he wanted some cause to which he can become famous as well. And if you look through the histories of that whole event, where what Gandhiji did, of course, was he negotiated very peacefully with the so-called wicked British planters and others, and allowed the Champaran peasants to really survive and do what they wanted to do. But if you look at it a little deeper, what was happening was the main product of the Champaran peasants was indigo. And indigo was booming, suddenly booming in demand for a reason very often not acknowledged even at that time. Because the blue jeans, which we all value today, at that time was prescribed uniform for working class people. Because it was easy to wash, the factory owners didn't have to pay much. It had not become fashionable like it's become now. Okay? At that time, blue jeans boomed in Europe and America, and they needed indigo. Okay, so that is why the price shot up many-fold. And what happened? He suddenly brought it down, and Gandhiji had to run because the British planters were forcing the people to grow indigo, where the prices had dropped to 2 or 3% of the former price. And it just seemed to be wickedness. And you know what happened? Bayer company in Germany synthesized indigo. That is so. In a forthcoming book I'm writing, one chapter is called How Organic Synthesis Created a Mahatma. So I'll probably be expelled from India, but nonetheless. So, there are these things which happen as we're currently going through on the AI front. The conclusions vary from time to time, but you open any newspaper or any online site, there will be saying X thousand jobs down. Now, the main consulting companies are saying we are cutting by 20%, 30%, etc., etc. And the one which makes me shudder with fear is that the common conclusion is that middle management the person called middle managers will be eliminated from all companies in the next 3 to 5 years. The middle management, of course, at the top there are 15 or 20 people in top management. At the bottom there are maybe 10,000, 25 or 50,000 workers, salesmen and others, delivery boys and so on. The middle is middle management. Now the general conclusion is that middle managers are the ones who keep sitting and doing analytic reports and having minutes of meetings and discussions and all. AI will take their jobs away. So that's a very interesting possibility. But again, I think you remember Champaran and remember the Bombay textile strike. You have to really see what is going on. It takes a little while. One should not do anything in haste. Okay, but there seems to be one conclusion possible, which I thought I'd share with you. When in my head I keep blending economic history with analytics, only then do you get to see what's really going on. One key issue is that many of the so-called middle managers that we have all over the world, not just in India, tend to be people who spend time doing analytics, having meetings, writing reports, etc., etc. There is a general belief that all the new methods that are being discovered in AI can all do that in a fraction of the time that human beings can do. Okay? So consequently, that is the reason my conclusion that middle management is going to be eliminated. The economic consequences are unbelievable. First of all, around IT services companies, the export revenue largely comes from that sector, replacing middle management. So I think it's an aspiration of the Indian middle class. But anyway, after having thought through all of this, I think what we need to do, and having been part of the 10-man team which created the national education policy, I would say that at the moment we have focused too much of education and wasting people's time on giving them how to sit in the background and do analytics, etc. But that is very important, that will never change. We need to do we need to stop producing graduates proficient in analysis and discussion and so on, and produce graduates capable of initiating, executing skillful actions in the real world environment. The case studies that we use to teach, even in the IIMs, I'm very familiar with that group, is all about analytical case studies. In the end, the winner of in a case study, there will always be a guy who wins, etc. One who gets ahead is the one who is superior analytically. We change that to common case studies about people who execute, and execute very well, and execute in a humane manner, and execute without being tyrants. You can be all of this, be very socialistic in your execution, at the same time you generate very high productivity execution. So that's a whole series of pioneering work which we need to put together, because that never gets any attention in academic circles, the science and art of execution. I think also experiential learning, because I remember when I went to IIM, I joined IIM, my father was a doctor in Kannur, it's a small town in Kerala, and my grandparents were doctors, etc., etc. In the typical South Indian middle class, okay? And one of my uncles who was a professor asked me, what do you want to do when you grow up? I said, I want to be a football player. So when I said, Kerala is passionate about football, and at that time I was like, my father said, get into the car, I got it, and he took me around to some paddy fields in Kannur. There was an old man sitting there washing pots, and he asked me, do you know who he is? I said, no, he used to be the goalkeeper of Mohammedan Sporting in Bengal. Do you? So he asked me, do you want to be like him? I said, no. So I gave up football the next few months. I would play, but it was no longer my goal. And then somebody said, there's something called IIM, take the test. I said, okay, I went and took the test, not knowing what an IIM is. And 1969. So then I got a letter 1.5 months later saying, out of 88,000 people who took the test, you're ranked third and welcome to join us. So I said, all of India, they're ranking me third. It can't be that much of a great place. It's a typical small town boy's view, you don't know. So when I went there, took the train and then joined Calcutta and so on. At that time, the IIM Calcutta campus and ISI campus were in the same compound. So I had no idea what, somebody said, we were to do a project with India Tobacco Company, now called ITC. And I thought people sat in large companies like this in the galleries of the stadium. I had no idea what people would do. And today, if you ask a small town boy, what do people in large companies do? You won't know. So I think it's a good idea to make sure that people, particularly at the undergraduate level across India, get some summer trainee type thing. I pushed very hard and made sure that it is inside the national education policy. Okay, so now we have to push for implementation. I'm doing my best I can. Some states are starting to implement so that young middle class boys or girls will see what is the reality of life outside. You don't know. You honestly don't. Because I'm sure a lot of you are laughing and agreeing with me. That means you're all probably also with the middle class background, so you understand this to be real. When I say this in some New York conference, they all look at me and say, "What is this guy trying to exaggerate?" Which is for them not seen this. Anyway, so I think some of these things make education experiential. So what we need to do is remember the two cases that I recounted today briefly, and make sure that as AI finds its way into life, we all judge it correctly and not go for it or against it. Like any new technology, will have pluses and minuses. And I hope if all of you will say yes, and you will start thinking deeply about what are the pluses and minuses and where to guide, I think my job would have been done for today. Thank you.
Sharing your wonderful anecdotes, and I'm sure our students would be very inspired after listening to you. So we'll take questions from the audience.
Questions. So that's
So you mentioned that in today's day and age, as middlemen are being removed from the company, so how do you think we should approach leadership and execution? I mean, do you have any paradigms for us to approach execution and leadership?
Well, it's not middlemen, middle management. But it's interesting, middlemen just got eliminated in the last 5 years, because the internet, online commerce was essentially elimination of middlemen. We buy directly, right? I want a book, I don't longer go to a bookshop, and as much as I like going to bookshop, I buy it online. So that job has been done. This is middle management. We don't quite know, because when I look at it, I feel depressed, because it would really mean that inside a company, a large company, about at least 30 to 40% of your employees will be in the middle. So the social cost of removing them, it's horrible. So I don't know. As I said, all that I want you to do is suggest is carefully think, listen, read all points of view, and only then form a view. Okay? And not just say, oh, middlemen are being eliminated like the Champaran peasants, and blame the wicked British planters, and you can say somebody else, pick some other villain. And don't do that. Just, yeah.
I think I would like to give the answer to this question. Not the middle manager will be removed. The people who are not ready to relearn, unlearn, they will be removed from the jobs. Okay, so especially in TCS, when you see that 12,000 guys, the reasoning was very simple. They didn't remove all the people; they removed all those guys who are not ready to relearn. Okay, if you are not relevant in the upcoming planning of the organization. So the answer to your question could be that whenever you go anywhere, it's not middle, even at the entry level you can be removed. So wherever you go, you keep unlearning, relearning, reinventing your skill set, then definitely you will.
He is quite right in some ways, and there's another which also triggers another thought in my head. during my excavation of what's going on in India through committees and personally, one big thing is we are discovering there are Indians by and large, man or woman, around the age of 35 stop learning anything new. And they stop, it's not my view on this, and they stop taking initiatives and taking risks of any kind. So when you dig a little deeper, there are some patterns. That's the time, that's around, when you're 40s, around the time your parents are old, you're worrying about their parents' health, and he gets preoccupied with the family matters. Or your children at that time are out, struggling to get to the right college. So, because we are such a family-oriented country and culture, that you take mind away from learning new things. Meanwhile, particularly in the computer and AI age, every 5 years the programming language will change and you have to relearn it. Every 7-8 years the economic models will change. We're all worried about, worrying about retail shops collapsing thanks to removing middlemen, that whole thing. But today they seem to have adjusted. So it's a matter for some debate. I don't know quite the answer, but there is a belief that in India people more or less stop learning about 35, 40. What can we do about it? We'll have to see. Thanks. Done?
Mr. Balakrishnan, this is taking off from your last comment. When you said that in India people stopped learning during the mid-30s, is it a recent phenomenon or an old phenomenon? If it is a recent phenomenon...
I don't know enough. I'm just posing one of the riddles that we are seeing. I don't know is it I've heard that it's a very ancient Hindu culture, but I said, let's not bring religion into this. They only come to complicate the analysis. But I don't know the answer. All of you can think about it.
The reason I'm asking this is because as far as there is a widely held view that people who went to libraries earlier had this drive to study, to imagine, to learn till the end of their lives, fairly till in the advanced stages. Now with the information glut and everything is at our fingertips, on our mobile screens, if we have stopped learning, then does it pose questions to the kind, to the safety or to the, the convenient way in which knowledge is being offered?
I don't know. The criticism is not about not reading or not going to libraries. The criticism is about it is being alleged. I'll say alleged because I'm not 100% convinced. That the drive to go and do new things, the drive to take risks, the drive to acquire new skills, completely new skills, seems to fade out at that time. Please don't take that as my view, not at all. I hope it is not true, but I hear this and read about this all over the place. I'm an avid reader of journals, even research journals are pointing this out. Faculty at the IIMs and IITs apparently around, after their 40s, they don't publish very much. I don't know if it's true, but but it's something to think about, and I personally don't believe in it because I think at the moment, I'm 77, and I read 77 years old, and I read 6 books a week. I think, so it is not, that's something to think about.
So, continuing the event, our next keynote speaker is Professor Madhavan Mukund. Professor Madhavan Mukund studied at IIT Bombay and Aarhus University, Denmark. He is presently director of Chennai Mathematical Institute, where he has been a faculty member since 1992. He is also director of the Indo-French Research Lab in Computer Science set up in CMI by the French National Center for Scientific Research. He He has served as president of both the ACM Indian Council and the Indian Association for Research in Computing Sciences. He is a fellow of the Indian Army of Sciences. His main research area is formal verification. He is a member of the editorial board for several international journals and has served on program committees of many leading conferences. He is also passionate about CS education at all levels. He plays an active role in ACM India's CS Pathshala initiative to introduce computational thinking in schools. He has been the national coordinator of the Indian Computing Olympiad since 2002. He teaches online courses on algorithms, programming and data structures for the NPTEL project of Ministry of Education, Government of India. As well, the online Bachelors in Programming and Data Science offered by IIT Madras. He has co-authored the book Computational Thinking, a primer for programmers and data scientists with Mr. G Venkatesh. So, please welcome Professor Madhavan Mukund.
So I wasn't sure if I would use this presentation or not, because I was not sure going last how much it would overlap. But I think there is not much overlap. So also I think I'm the person who possibly took the title of this talk most literally. I don't know whether it was because I was jet lagged or because I'm too much of an academic to read between the lines. So I'm actually going to talk about education in there, okay, which nobody else has talked about to my knowledge. So as was mentioned, I do many things in the space of education, and in particular, I've been traveling in the last 50 hours to get here from the Informatics Olympiad, so please forgive me if I'm a little incoherent. So let's talk about AI to begin with. Okay, so AI has been around for a long time, but suddenly there's this huge buzz about why AI is influencing education. It's really, we are talking about generative AI. Okay, so classical machine learning is not really a threat to anybody. We are really worried about what we see in large language models, ChatGPT, DALI, all these kind of things, right? And the question is, are we reaching a situation where learning is actually a question of asking the right questions to a large language model? So are we really reducing the idea, are we thinking of reducing the idea of learning to what they call prompt engineering? Right? Ask the right question, you will get the answer. You don't have to learn anything because you can always find it out by asking one of these super kind of knowledgeable systems. And of course, as somebody asked this question earlier, so is this as a consequence leading to some kind of cognitive decline in our society? Right? So our children who are growing up with this kind of system at hand, are they suffering some long-term disability in terms of being able to handle these cognitive skills, right? Some kind of cognitive offloading is one of the technical terms, where you essentially is outsourcing, right? Instead of thinking for yourself, you ask this thing to think for you, and does it consequently lead to mental laziness? So I'm not going to address these questions because I think it's too early to say, but I'm just saying that these are some of the concerns that people have about the general landscape of, this is how I interpreted this question, okay? What is the role of AI and how should we reimagine education given this widespread availability of these generative AI systems, which are growing in capability. Every 6 months you get something which is much better than what was there 6 months ago. So it's also, we don't even know at the moment what is the limit of these things. Okay? So many people have talked about this. I think Ramkumar in particular talked about this and came up. So we will not quibble about the definition of knowledge. But the question is, are we teaching facts or are we teaching concepts? Right? So that's really the question. So my contention, and this is my contention in this whole talk, is that all these discussions are not new. Okay? This is only something which has been accelerated by the availability of generative AI. Right? So for the last 20 years, facts have gone out of fashion. Right? So when I was in IIT, it was a big thing to be on the IIT quiz team. It is no longer a big thing to be on the IIT quiz team. Because if you have an argument, you just open your phone and you say, like, I was in Bolivia, what is the height of La Paz? Right? I don't have to argue with you. You can look it up, I can look it up. I can tell you it's 100 meters higher than Leh. Okay, so it's pretty high. 3,650 meters. So these are questions which no longer interest you. And similarly, if you are going to teach this in a classroom, it no longer interests the student. Right? So Googling has been part of our way of life for enough time that the transmission of facts is no longer a source of excitement to the student. Right? And this has only been amplified by generative AI. Right? It's not something new. That's all I'm trying to say. Right? So now, earlier, when you asked a search engine a question, it will give you existing text, right, from which you have to draw some conclusion as to whether it's answered your question or not, because it is in the words of whoever wrote that text. The difference now is that generative AI can actually take multiple sources of text and produce it in a format where you believe it has answered your question. So it's more directly addressing your needs, and therefore it seems to be a more powerful source of knowledge. It is still rewriting other people's words to suit you, but from a casual user's perspective, it is something which seems to be telling you something more personalized and meaningful. And therefore, again, just to emphasize, sorry, I've got multiple devices going on here. Yeah, so to emphasize, the point is that knowledge is not the ball game. Okay? So I'm going to, it's very difficult to argue this in the abstract, so I'll make a few references to a concrete context. So one of the things which I teach a lot is Introduction to Programming. Okay? And this is one of the questions which has been coming up in a lot of forums, including in kind of education forums. So the problem with Introduction to Programming is that every standard exercise that you set in Introduction to Programming class can be solved instantly by any self-respecting generative AI system. Right? So there is no question that you can ask an introductory programming class which cannot be instantly solved correctly. It can even be solved saying, write it wrong, make some subtle mistakes, misspell some things, put comments, don't put comments, all these things it can do. Right? So the challenge is now, what do you want to teach such a student? Because for such a student, the questions are now trivial, right? If I ask you to write a program to do whatever, you feed it into one of these systems and you get a program that does whatever. So the question that from a student's perspective is, why do I need to do this, learn this, because I can do it automatically? It's the same question which 40 years ago we were asking, why do I need to have to multiply 4-digit numbers by hand? Because I have a calculator. Right? Why do I need to know how to do this? Because it's not a useful way of spending my time. Okay? So the question really comes down to, then is this what we are teaching when we are teaching programming? Right? So what are we supposed to be teaching? Are we teaching them the right skills when we ask them to solve these sort of mundane computational tasks using whatever programming language we are using as our vehicle to learn? Okay? So is this right? Now I claim that this is not a Gen AI problem. We have been out of touch with programming, between introduction to programming and what a programmer does for decades. Okay, so no programmer goes out in the real world and starts writing code from scratch. Everybody is incrementally updating code. It's almost never the case that you are going to start saying, here I want to write a system that does this, start and give it to me. Right? So really this way of thinking of a programming task as building something from zero to the full thing is actually something which is not realistic. And we have not been teaching this skill. Okay? And the other thing that we have not been teaching now, Gen AI is particularly seductive because you can give the question and get an answer, but for decades you have been able to ask Stack Overflow to give you the answer. Okay, so just to give you an anecdote, about 10 years ago when I started teaching this NPTEL course, and I needed to program automatic way of evaluating assignments. So the student would submit, so the trick was that the student would submit Python code, and I had to run that Python code on the answer to check whether it's right. So it was not the normal thing where the Python code runs on the thing, but I had to run the Python code. And I was trying to, NPTEL has a kind of peculiar platform. So I was struggling with this, and I had an undergrad intern, an undergrad student who was doing a kind of TA for this. So he came up with this brilliant solution. So I congratulated him on the solution. I asked him, how did he find out? He said, I looked it up on Stack Overflow. So I said, oh. So he had just done a summer internship in math, okay, not even in computer science. And he said the one thing he learned in his summer internship from his advisor was never program something without first looking it up on Stack Overflow. Okay? So this was 10 years ago. So it's not Gen AI. Right? So this problem of how to teach programming or whether we are teaching the right thing in programming has been around for a long time, but now we are aware of it, I would say. So Gen AI just brought it to the fore. So as I said, most of coding is actually code maintenance, right? You're trying to fix bugs, add functionality, not break the code that's there. We don't teach this kind of stuff. So maybe we should be teaching this. Okay. So this was also alluded to before. So what we really should be teaching at some level, and I'm not saying I know how to teach this. Okay, it's a difficult. See, teaching is not easy. Okay? There are many things you want to achieve through teaching. But it's not, there is no formula, magic formula to achieve this. But what we really want to teach is problem solving, right? So that is what the programming is, only a vehicle to problem solving. So what you really want to teach, and this is the same thing that happens in school, right? You can teach addition, subtraction, multiplication, but finally you want to teach them to take a word problem, whatever, 2 children went to the shop and one bought a pencil and 20 pencils for this much and that. So this kind of question, and then they have to translate it into addition, multiplication, subtraction, and so on. Right? So you need to have that skill of being able to take a problem and solve it using the techniques that you know how to solve. And that is what you should be teaching in a programming course. But of course, we tend to get lost in the syntax of the programming. And that to a large extent it's a function of which programming language you're teaching. Say a language like Python is probably simpler to teach than a language like C or C++ because it has fewer syntactic issues to get around. But still, somehow we should shift the focus to the problem solving end. Right? So you get a complicated problem, what are the components of the problem, break down the problem, and then for each of the problem components that you have identified, if it's simple enough, maybe that's when you use your Gen AI system to give you some code to solve it. And then how do you integrate all these parts to find a big solution? So something like this, we should probably reinvent how we teach these kind of things. So as I said, this is very specific to Introduction to Programming, but I hope that there is some generality in this which you can apply to other courses also. The other thing that we don't tend to teach, and this is related to my previous comment, is we don't tend to teach students how to read code. It's when you are writing code, you are very often, of course, understanding what you have written from the context because you created it. But if you go back and read your same code 1 year later, it's very likely you have no idea what it's doing. And now, in a real world scenario, you are typically maintaining code written by other people and you're trying to fix it. So somehow we should also inculcate this skill as part of the introduction to programming. It's not just a question of writing trivial code, but reading non-trivial code and trying to figure out whether it's right, wrong, what are the corner cases which may be missing, and so on. So now, this is now the big challenge, right? Can you critique other people's code without having written enough code yourself? If you have only been using GenAI to produce code, are you in a position to be able to read some other code and validate whether it is written properly or not? So this is a difficult question for me. My personal instinct is that it's difficult to do this. That if you have not suffered the pain of corner cases, edge cases, less than being wrong, less than equal to, all these things, it's very hard to spot these in other people's code. Okay? So to me, the analogy that comes to mind is from literature. Right? So almost any book written by a famous author has gone through an equally famous editor. Right? So now the editor is playing this role of being the critiquer. So no editor or very few editors actually write books themselves. So they are not people who write the books, but they are in a position to look at a book which somebody else has written and say, cut this, make this shorter, emphasize this character, and make constructive suggestions which improve the book. Okay? So we need to teach. I don't know how this happens. Okay, so I'm not claiming that I know how this happens, but it is possible, right? To have people who do not generate but who can critique. Therefore, it should be possible in principle to teach programmers how to critique, even if you cannot persuade them to generate. But I don't know how to do this. So now, I said that one of the ways of addressing this problem of GenAI being able to code anything which is reasonably simple is to actually give the problem as a complex problem and ask them to solve it, and then hopefully GenAI cannot do it. Right? So the question is, can GenAI solve more complicated problems effectively? Now, conventional, the large language models like ChatGPT and all that are not very good at this. Okay, and one example which is sometimes cited, may not be true anymore because nothing in this world is true after 6 months, but it was true 1 year ago, is that you know this problem, right? So this farmer lands up at this river and he has to cross the river, and he has a wolf, goat, and a cabbage. Okay? The wolf will eat the goat will eat the cabbage, but the wolf will not eat the cabbage. So now he can only take one thing across. So how should he ferry all the things across without anybody eating anything? Right? So for example, if you take the goat across, the wolf and the cabbage are safe because the wolf doesn't eat the cabbage. So you ask this question to any LLM, it has been solved enough times on the internet, so it will spit out the answer. Now you tell this same system that the cabbage can eat the wolf and the goat can eat the, okay? You just permute the names somehow. Right? So you change the relationship between these three things and they get completely confused. So this is the typical problem, right? So the typical LLM is a very syntactic thing. It just reproduces patterns which it has digested, and therefore there is no logical reasoning at all. So far so good. But now people have realized that this is so what LLMs are good at doing is to basically recognize frequent patterns of text. And on the other hand, you have more complicated solvers, math-aware systems that can reason. The problem is that those are very difficult to use because you don't know how to continue the next line of reasoning. But if you have enough examples of reasoning, enough proofs done in these systems, then you can get an LLM to recognize, lines of proof. And if it makes a mistake, the solver will say that doesn't work. Right? So it's a kind of a self-balancing system. The LLM is generating suggestions, try this. The solver is saying it works, I've got one more step. Or solver says this doesn't work, so he says, okay, then try this instead. Right? So this is what people have been experimenting with. So last month was the Math Olympiad, and there was kind of these systems which did incredibly well. I think they all got some of them got gold medals. Okay. Last week I was at the Informatics Olympiad and they allowed one such system to be on site, where they monitored that no funny business was going on, right? That you're not suddenly feeding human intervention into the system. They were told not to release the results for a week, so I don't know. But we got some informal feedback that halfway through the Olympiad, they were not going to get a medal. Okay, so the jury is out whether these systems actually work. And the other question is, we don't know how these systems are they only trained to solve specific kinds of math Olympiad problems? Can they reason in general? We don't know. Okay, so there is an issue about whether or not these Gen AI systems can actually get to the stage of problem solving, but I have my doubts that they can actually bridge that gap in general without a human in the loop. So the other question is this thing that these Gen AI systems produce garbage occasionally. So I think Ramkumar mentioned about the productivity in software industry. In January, we had a kind of two-day symposium which CMI organized, where we actually asked various industries to report on their usage of Gen AI. And we had one very interesting session where this person from a kind of smallish, medium-sized, not TCS scale software company said that they had actually done an analysis of this, and they found that anybody with, say, fix a number, say 4 years or more of experience found themselves more productive with Gen AI. Anybody with less than 4 years experience found themselves less productive with Gen AI. They were spending more time fixing the bugs that Gen AI created than they would have if they had done the code on their own. Right? So it is definitely the case that if you rely on these systems, you have to have some expertise independently to evaluate whether what these systems are doing is correct or not. Okay? And of course, now the challenge is, how do you become this expert if you are not learning? Okay? So you have to get that expertise from somewhere. If you are using Gen AI as your crutch to lean on, then again it goes back to the earlier question of how do you critique code if you've never written it. Okay? So these are some of the issues. So now let me just quickly switch gears. So now from the perspective of actual teaching, right? So I was just generally talking about what kinds of things we should be teaching. Right? So one of the obvious things that we need to do in order to engage students is to make the content attractive and, in some sense accessible. But again, this is not something which is a Gen AI phenomenon, right? So this is something which has been happening over the last 10, 15 years, ever since, online learning became possible or a real thing, right? There's a lot of excellent content which is there, and people have also realized how to package it so that it comes in short segments of 10 minutes, 15 minutes. This is the backbone of many of these online things, including NPTEL, where I teach. And to address Ramkumar's question about scale, there's the IIT BS program where GV and I have played a role, which now reaches out to something like 35,000 students. It's not huge in the scale of a country, but it is significantly larger than any institution has on campus in India. Okay? So these things work, and students have got used to this, especially because of the pandemic. Right? Because during the pandemic, almost everybody was kind of learning online in some form or other. So, in some sense, attention span is definitely reduced. I mean, I can see this as a teacher. Right? So, the capacity of the patience of students to read long pieces of conventional textbook material or even listen to a conventional lecture is definitely much less than it used to be. So, but I claim that this has nothing to do with Gen AI. Right? But Gen AI has made it a little bit more acute in the sense that, people feel that it's because of Gen AI that's happened, but I don't think it's true that. But now what can you do? Well, as a teacher, all I could suggest is that, you can use Gen AI to get around this bottleneck of how to make your material interesting. A lot of us, let's just face it, right? Being a creative artist is not easy. So if you have to come up with nice illustrations or nice animations, you may have an idea how to do this or what should be there, but it's a very rare skill to be able to develop as an academic. And this is the kind of place where GenAI can actually do it for you. If you tell GenAI, I want something that does this, it's relatively easy to get it to do something respectable, which you can show in public. Okay? So you can definitely make presentations more accessible and more interesting using GenAI. But the real danger is that now, because this is possible, right, you can ask GenAI to produce your entire presentation. And then you risk the same thing that happens. So many kind of well-used textbooks, for example, right? So one book that comes to mind is there's a database book by Silvershats, Korth and Sudarshan. Sudarshan is in IIT Bombay. Right? So with every edition of the book, you get a full set of downloadable PPT slides. So it's of course very tempting to go into class because you don't have to do anything. The PPTs are there and they follow the book. But if you have not read the book and you go into class and you have even 1.5 students who understand what's going on, you are in deep trouble. So this is the problem, right? So if GenAI generates a slide for you and if you don't know what it's done, then you are going to be in deep trouble when you stand up in front of the students. So I think it's a little bit, one has to be wary from the teacher's perspective about using GenAI without caution. But I think that the biggest challenge of all that GenAI is kind of currently posing to the education community is in assessment. So Ramkumar mentioned about assessment going beyond exams. Okay? So till this IIT Madras BS program started, okay, I used to think that, and I think this is a commonly held belief, that you have not understood something. You cannot claim to have understood something if you cannot explain it to somebody else and make them understand it. Okay, but thanks to this large-scale issue and working with people who understand the material, I mean, I'm confident that they understand the material, but now having delivered the lectures, right, my role in the IIT Madras BS program is to validate the question papers that these intermediate instructors set, and they set terrible questions. Okay? So I spend a lot of time fixing their questions because they have no idea what they're asking. So this is my revised statement, right? You know something when you are able to judge whether somebody else has understood it. So you need to assess. Okay? So assessment at one side is, of course, a matter of need because every student needs to be somehow, somebody needs an independent validation that they know what they're supposed to have learned, right? Whether it is a company hiring them or higher studies for some further degree that they want to go. So there is that need for assessment. But I think also from our perspective as teachers, we need to assess to know whether we have done our job. And now the biggest challenge in assessment is that traditionally assessment tests facts, right? And especially if you do it at scale, where you cannot always ensure that everybody who is being assessed is sitting in a room under controlled conditions. Right? Anything which involves just testing knowledge is easily subverted by using GenAI. Right? So you really need to design new and creative modes of assessment. Already designing, even without GenAI, designing assessment which is at scale for courses like the NPTEL courses which I have been running is already hard. Okay, so this is not easy. Designing good assessment is not easy, but this is a challenge that we have to take up if we are going to reimagine how we are going to work in this world. Okay, so to summarize, okay, my claim is that the challenges thrown up by GenAI are not new. These are the same challenges. They have only been amplified and magnified in our eyes because it has become so prominent in some sense because of the availability of GenAI. Okay? But we need to emphasize understanding of facts. We need to teach critical thinking, problem solving. We need to make our teaching material more attractive. And we need to design meaningful assessments. Right? And overall, we have to, of course, there is a separate issue which I did not address at all, which is how do you teach students to use AI? Right? So that's an important aspect. So to recognize that it is a useful tool, but it is not a crutch, right? It's not a replacement for their ability to think on their own. Okay? So you would also have noticed that all my slides had the right-hand side half white because I had this grand plan like Ramkumar of generating AI pictures, but I ran out of that. So thank you.
For addressing such an important topic also. Now we take questions. If anyone has any questions, please raise your hand. If not, then I have a question for you, sir, which is basically you're talking about how students can also be educated about how to use AI. So if you could speak a bit about that, since that is something which would be very useful for the students.
Yeah, so I think this one way, so I think what needs to be explained is that these systems make mistakes. I think that is the most fundamental system. But the problem with that, unfortunately, is that the mistakes or the examples that you come up with today are typically no longer valid sort of maybe 3-4 months down the line. So you have to continuously be looking out for it. So it's a challenge to keep this the list of potential failures up to date with the currently available technology. But I think that is one aspect. Because how to use it, of course, everybody knows how, I mean, it's designed to be easy to use. But how to be skeptical about it, I think that's what we need to really convey.
Ma'am,
there's a question there. Yeah, there's one question here, then I'll come.
Okay, so we have a question from a student, Tushar, submitted online. So he's asking that we do not have any Q1 level journals, mathematical journals in India. So do you have any comments on that? Why do we not have? How should we take any initiatives to take that in India?
So to me, I mean, I have never understood, honestly, why we need to have journals in India. There are, as long as there are enough journals to publish in quality, it does not, to me, make any difference whether the journal is published in India or anywhere else. So the other answer to the question is that there are a lot of things which go towards making a high quality journal. And the first thing is that it needs to build a brand. So journals, like any other sort of thing, need to build a brand. So if you start a journal, then you need to ensure that the right kind of people publish in that journal, so in some sense a journal becomes strong if strong people publish in that journal, and for that journal must already have a reputation. So it's a little hard to build that reputation in a crowded market. So there have been attempts, but I think the real problem is that the same people who start these journals themselves don't publish in these journals. They publish in other journals. So they publish in journals where they feel they get more visibility or more prestige. So these journals suffer basically from a lack of support. So that is the real reason. I think it's very hard to start a new thing and sustain it till it builds its brand.
My question is more of an academic nature. I teach this machine learning course because you mentioned machine learning and generative
I also
AI.
teach machine learning.
Machine learning course, and generative AI is complex deep learning architectures. So, however, when I was teaching this machine learning, when I teach machine learning, I'm very excited to teach that because the concepts can be better understood with the machine learning course. However, if you go for the deep learning, most of it is a black box. So do you think that nowadays everything is deep learning or generative, whatever, discriminative or generative, which is a deep learning based? Do you think that the machine learning still has to be taught, or I can directly go for the deep learning because anyway I did not bother about how my algorithm works? But what I was thinking is that it's better to understand how the architecture of deep learning works so that you can come up with the new ideas there. So,
yeah, so you're right. I mean, so from a purely functional perspective, if you just want to build a model which solves whatever classification problem, whatever you want, there is no value in some sense, going for traditional models because you can just throw it at a neural network. But actually, it turns out that from a usability perspective, right? So if you are actually an organization which is using this to make some decisions, then it's important to understand what are the input parameters which influence. I mean, so what is the structure of the model? It becomes important. So from that perspective, the simpler models are more useful because they have some better explainability. And I think that is the real differentiator. So I think if you have really difficult questions like image processing and some audio or things like that, where basically there are no features in some sense, right? So one pixel on the screen doesn't convey in itself any meaning. It's some combination of colors and pictures. Whereas if you have tabular type of data, which you can also feed to this, but there the columns have some meaning, then it's sometimes much more preferable to have a simpler model because you're not necessarily going to get much better accuracy, but you'll get much better explainability. So I think that is the differentiator from my point of view. And most problems which are of the traditional, industry use case type of thing where you're trying to optimize certain resources or certain other things are actually fit this paradigm where they have data which is actually meaningful, right? And then you're looking at some combination of meaningful parameters which determine something rather than, pixel values or some sound. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, sure. Yeah. I can hear you. I don't know if they can hear you, but I'll repeat the question. Yeah.
So, as a teacher, how much of learning or unlearning will I have to do to adapt AI for my students?
So this is a difficult question. So I think you need, there are two parts, right? So you don't need to understand AI, you need to be able to understand what AI is capable of doing from the perspective of whatever you're teaching. Right? So you need to know, as I said, mostly the teaching I don't think is a problem. It is really, to me, the biggest bottleneck right now is assessment. Right? So you need to be able to understand or find out from your students what kind of questions are trivial if they just feed it to an LLM and which are not. And this is not easy to do. I don't claim it is easy to do, but I think your best ally is your student. So I think you have to find some students, because they are of course much more, it is in their own self-interest to explore these things. So I think it's a project which you have to do. I think, and the difficulty is, as I said, that the LLMs are not, or these Gen AI systems are not static. Right? So they're doing various tweaks to improve, especially when there are known, anomalies which people have reported. So the things that it could not do today, it will probably do 6 months from now. So that is very hard to keep track of. But at least I think you will get some broad picture that certain kinds of questions are easy for LLMs to solve and certain kinds are not so easy. And then maybe, like I said, you permute the wolf, the goat and the cabbage and you'll get an answer. Right?
So we have one more question from the faculty. So Sanjay sir from okay, sure.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Now, we will go on to the next event, the panel discussion on the topic Reimagining Higher Education in the Age of AI. Let me introduce moderator Professor G Venkatesh. Professor G Venkatesh is a Professor of Practice at IIT Madras. He is also a Fellow and Director of Saskin Communication Technologies Limited, a leading Indian R&D service provider. It is, however, our great pleasure to announce that Professor Venkatesh is shortly joining DAU as the Director of the School of Technology. His experience in the education and business field led him to co-found Knowledge for Education Services in 2015 and Agami Fintech Solutions in 2023. He is a part of the founding team that created IIM Madras Online BSc degree in Programming and Data Science. Dr. Venkatesh was elected as a Fellow of the Indian National Academy of Engineering in 2006 and the IETE in 2012. In recognition of his activities linking academics and industry, he won the Technometer Award of the Indian Electronics and Semiconductor Association in 2013 and the Vasvik Award for Industrial Research in 2015. He is a director on the board of 5 companies, including Section 8 companies, IIM Madras Pravartak and IIT DA-IICT, both of which commercialize technology ideas through startups. He is also a founder of the Communication Systems and Networks Association, which runs 2 premier international conferences in India, ComsNet and AIML System. Let's welcome Professor G Venkatesh.
Okay, welcome to this panel discussion. So I think there have been many ideas that have been floated by all 3 of you. So I wanted to take all the 3 things that all things that you presented and put some structure and maybe integrate it. That is going to be my role. So around 3 themes, then after that we'll open it up for questions from the audience. So the first theme is about AI and jobs. So clearly it looks like AI is going to make an impact on jobs. That is the kind of summary I am. But certain kinds of jobs are going to be more immune than some other jobs. That's the kind of impression I'm getting. Creative tasks maybe are going to be less impacted and routine tasks are going to be more impacted. We don't know whether it's the entry jobs that will get affected or middle management. We talked about TCS laying off middle management. Whether that's good or bad, we don't know. But it has happened. That's a fact. And so we don't know. So, but on the other hand, I hear also that entry-level coding jobs are seriously at risk. And we also have seen basically many companies carrying out surveys internally. You mentioned one survey, and I've seen numbers, various numbers, like 30% of the jobs that people are doing today can be replaced with AI. In SASCAN, we did an exercise. I was leading an exercise, and we just finished the exercise, and we found that the number is like 10 to 15% for SASCAN. Probably lower in SASCAN because they're doing R&D work, right? So, what you said something, or if you said something about creativity and all that. So maybe certain jobs are more immune, we don't know. So the first theme I want to explore with all of you is basically AI and jobs. Which jobs are at risk? And how do we make sure when we choose our careers, students specifically here, how do we make sure we choose as careers that our jobs are AI proofed? In some sense, we build ourselves to be, in some sense, immune from the AI. What do we do? You want to start, Ramkumar? I think maybe, and then, or okay.
So, okay, I'll talk about, I will let Ramkumar and Ajit talk about software. But I just wanted to make a comment. This idea of creativity is also a little subjective because we are, of course, in a technology environment, we are thinking about software. But I have 2 anecdotes. So, one is a company that makes audio storybooks. You might have heard Current Details, right? The one that is. So about a year and a half ago, I was part of something similar to this, which they were doing in South India. They organized these things for school teachers and school principals. They had just lost, out of a 6-member team, if I'm not mistaken, a 6-member creative team, they had lost one person because that person had to relocate. And after looking around a little bit, they did not replace that person. That person got replaced by AI. Okay, so they managed with a 5-member team without having to find the replacement. So that is a creative job, but as long as it's a kind of routine job, basically what you can do is now if you have 5 experienced persons, you can get AI to do a first cut of whatever illustration or whatever it is that they need to do, and then get the other people to do the more refined work. And the other similar story I heard is, so this is more personal because my daughter is trying to make her way through this video editing and stuff like that, and she's been running into this thing where to get an internship she's been told that you need to have experience. She said, how can I get experience if I don't get an internship, and so on. So a very senior advertising person who is a friend of the family offered to help her, but she said the same thing. She said that just focusing on the fact that you know how to do video editing, you know how to handle the tools and do the editing and prepare these things is no longer enough, because that can be done by AI. So you really have to demonstrate that you can produce things which are aesthetically meaningful. So even in that space, I'm saying what we think of as creative space, you know, video editing or these kind of things, illustrations, so advertising, even there AI is taking jobs. So that's my comment. Okay.
No, it's tough to say, but look, I think what you said so far is absolutely correct. But I would say, having looked through job losses and job gains through 8 or 9 industrial revolutions so far, I think we just very patiently wait and tackle it item by item rather than having, like Karl Marx, a theory about how to save people from losing jobs by creating a revolution. I don't know. It's a little early. I'd say it's a little early. Watch it carefully and non-aggressively. You know, some will lose, some will gain. And when who will lose, we figure out ways to train them and put them back into something else. So it won't be seen as a threat.
Something else. That's a question.
Or something else would be something which doesn't require, people who use AI tools need to be brighter than before. It is like saying I got a calculator, but it doesn't mean that dumb people become smart. Clever people become even cleverer.
Right.
So I say be patient and wait to see how things go. There are no prescriptions. This will fail and that will succeed.
I think that's a nice segue. See, one way is to probably look at how AI is going to reinvent and reshape jobs. They're not going to be the same jobs that we know of as of today. It will probably be AI++, if you will. In that context, I think it's important that everybody understands and appreciates what AI can do in respective spheres of life. If you don't embrace, there is no way by which you can shape it. So that's the first step. Second is a lot of routine, repetitive, survival jobs, as Vinod Khosla calls it, may go away. You've already seen what's happening with respect to call centers. Certain profiles of sales jobs, certain jobs in content creation, visualization, digital design. Some of these are very real because at the click of a button, you are able to arguably get some 20, 30, 40 designs in a matter of seconds, which as human beings we may take many, many years. I'm sure that you all saw last week there is a company that went public in the US called Figma, Figma. How many of you have used Figma to create website designs? So earlier people who were creating, who were web developers and web designers, this company on listing is valued at $55 billion with a B. Fine. So, once you probably create those wireframes which are readily available, you can mix and match and then you can do things. Some of those jobs really yes. But having said that, if you're able to use some of these as some of the words actually remind you, co-pilot. If you're going to use them as assistants to accelerate, to sharpen, to beautify, you're going to probably become much smarter, as Ajit just said. Look at these as tools that enable you to become smarter and do higher order activities rather than end up doing some of the repetitive grunt job that you might otherwise get sucked into. It's very important that each one of us will have to go back and look at, for every discipline, every function, every task, what's it that some of these AI tools can do, and how we can make that a better version of what we were. It's eminently capable as teachers. Can I do my lesson planning using AI? Probably yes. I was doing end of year assessments. Can I do continuous assessments? Probably yes. Can I complete the feedback loop the same day after something is over? Probably yes. Why should I only look at a unilateral assessment technique? Can I use hackathons? Can I use quizzes? Can I use peer reviews? Rather than put them through a single examination constant. So I think at every stage we may have to go back and then say, hey look, how much more does AI enable me to stay relevant? But then if you're going to be stuck in the ways of doing that you're historically done, then you run the risk of setting yourself up for certain challenges.
May I give you one more example? Coming from a doctor-oriented family, father, grandfather, grandmother, etc., we were all worried that when Western medicine came to India, late 19th century, probably to solve smallpox and plague and things of that kind, the Indian Ayurvedic system as well as yoga and so on faded out of mainstream. But now today, in the 2025 period, practically all my friends, even CEOs of big American companies, are all into yoga or on total health. And they have advised me and say, Ajit, I hope you're not eating any pills. I said, so it is coming all the way back. But, so things of that kind could happen. So creative writing and creative illustration, visualization will always have a value. But it takes what happens is they go through a dip and then they come back in full fever. So be patient.
I think the summary is that you have to have a long horizon. I think you have to think about it over 30 years. I think so. There are some, just to summarize the points that were made. I think what you're saying is that there is no job that really is immune. Everything is affected. That's what I understand. But at the same time, you can think about AI as either displacing jobs or existing jobs. So displacing jobs area we have no control over. Let's see where we can use AI to assist us. That seems to be the, and wherever we can
it's
use
one
that.
more technological tool. There's no magic in AI.
Yeah, we have been
It
using
is
for
like,
very-
first there was a plow, there was a tool. And it's right through history we have those tools. That's it.
That's it. So that's how one has to look at it. Okay. So I want to move on to the second topic, the second theme in some sense, which is that higher education institutions as they were conceptualized, at some point in time they were conceptualized. Do we need to reimagine them? That is, in fact, the title for today. Just because the expectations from these institutions is changing now. Students are having a different expectation from what they will get out of education now. They're not happy with what they're getting. Maybe they want something else. Parents are having a different expectation. Companies which are hiring from the institutions have a different expectation. You mentioned some of them. So, what are the new expectations? What is the set of expectations that are there now with higher education institutions? Once we know them, then maybe there can be a response of the institution to try and meet these expectations. In the same order?
No, I definitely agree that, for instance, one obvious thing that you see nowadays is that the formal value of a degree, right, which used to be holy in some sense before, is no longer so sacrosanct. And of course, some kind of certification that somebody has, as I said, assessment has been done and they have been certified is important. But the kind of the depth or the nature of the certification is no longer so important. So therefore, one does, I think, have to imagine that there should be more variety in the kinds of certification that a higher education institution gives. Part of it, of course, is there in the NEP about having different exit options and all that. But that also requires the course to be restructured in such a way that if you leave after 2 years. So the IIT Madras online BS has done a reasonably, I would say, good job of defining what happens at different levels. But if you just take a standard program and say, okay, you have done 2 years out of a 4-year degree, now you leave with X, what have you really learned at that point for an external person to know about your thing is not very clear. So I think side by side, I think one has to, I don't think traditional degrees should be abandoned by any means, but I think there should be more creative ways of students who, I mean the need to go through 4 years to do something meaningful, I don't think it exists in such a way now, because both employers and people who are working have this flexibility now to take up things without going the full route. So I think that is where I think some rethinking has to be.
I entirely agree with Madhavan on that topic. I think micro-credentials are going to become a norm. It's just not going to be a degree. These are capsule 6-week, 8-week, 10-week programs certified by bodies which have that acceptability in the marketplace. About 20-30 years back, when the IT services industry started flourishing, you actually had more graduates in maths, physics and chemistry getting into the industry. We didn't have enough BTechs. It's the AppTechs and the NIITs, the GNIIT program which had the stamp of authority that got people into this industry. And when many of us started working very closely with some of the big players like Oracle and Microsoft, it is their certifications that were very valid in the marketplace and not the degrees that people brought. Whether it's a certified network security professional, so on and so forth. Even today, if you look at the entire industry, there is a lot of importance accorded to PMP professionals, project management professionals, and no institution, no MBA program in the country actually had focused on project management, which is accepted by the industry at large. So I guess we will probably see a lot more of these micro-credentials. There was an attempt, I think there are 2 companies, Flipkart and Ernst & Young, which came out publicly and said that, hey, look, we don't care whether you have a degree program or not. There are going to be alternative channels to hire. So today, hackathons have become a very important way. If you look at Chennai Mathematical Institute, people who qualify in the Olympiad, they can directly go and then join the graduate program. Need not necessarily be the normal process through which people actually get in. I get a feeling eventually you'll probably find alternative modes of assessment where a score in those certifications, nano-credentials will be more important, where a degree program would be a nice to have. Fine. Today we probably say a certification in this is preferable with a graduate program and some specialization. Eventually we may go down the path if the education institutions don't live up to the market expectation. That the importance accorded to a degree. See, if you go back in time, I'll tell you, when the services industry came about, nobody was worried about a BTech degree. It's all because if you're getting a US visa for a 4-year degree program, that the 4-year degree program even became acceptable in the marketplace. Until then, whether you're a +2 with some certificate or even a BSc, it didn't really matter in the marketplace. So sometimes these external trappings also get you to move in a particular direction. I guess eventually people with the right skill sets will move to a model where it's not the qualification but the skills. And if you can assess those skills using alternative methods and channels, that will probably gain a lot more currency.
If I may give a little convoluted answer, one of the issues that I wanted to bring up today, which has not come up as a question, is that in India, if you're a tech startup entrepreneur, for example, your biggest problem you'll find is Indian markets are very small, minuscule, compared to being in the United States or even Europe. But when you dig a little deeper and you see the reason why Indian markets are very small is quite fascinating. It's because you look deep and you say, how did Google get born? They got a project fund. Their project for getting the algorithm right was from US Defense, DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Project Association. It's not an exaggeration, but about 60% of the technical companies founded in technology in the Silicon Valley are all living off, at least in the first 5 years, out of well-priced, good projects from DARPA. Now, if you go and try and sell a technology I did to an Indian defense, and I've tried it, many of the, let's say, generals who are in charge of some of these arts graduates, they have no clue about technology. So Indian defense, my father served in it and all that stuff, they are not buyers of innovation. They like to get somebody from Germany or Russia to make it, but at most you'll get it manufactured locally. The innovation is always abroad. So how do we make sure that the Indian defense funding is more creative? It's very important to write through history. All technical innovation has been funded by defense. Before all of you get shocked and ask, how can it be true? The so-called steel that was used was somewhere in Mysore. It was first created in Mysore. Okay, so I think the 11th century or probably earlier. And then from there, an Englishman went to all these little places in rural Mysore and found how they were adding carbon to iron and creating steel and all that. And he took the idea and formed the first steel plant in the UK. That's the history. But why was steel being created here? It was created to make swords for in the Middle East.
Right.
Okay. So that it was originally steel was invented in Mysore, so they could make steel, create it in blocks, and they'll send it to Arabia where they would make swords out of it. So from that time till now, defense spending is 70-80% about innovation. Penicillin is another one, and many other cases. Virtually everything in the semiconductor area, a lot of the AI funding, in the United States, maybe 95% of the funding is defense. In India, you don't have it. So that's what, again, it's not an accusatory statement. We have to put our arms around our colonels and brigadiers and figure out a way to comfortably get them to take the risk and do that. Yeah, I thought I'll bring that up.
Yeah, so good point. So I think what I understand basically is that we got to rethink the kind of degrees or programs that we are offering and maybe incorporate a lot of innovation. Try and see whether we can produce a system which generates more innovation from the institute.
Related at the risk of talking too much, while we have an entrance exam system, I know one for the IITs and IIMs, and I'm sure for medical and other. What started with the intention of being a meritocratic country. I mean, objectively saying we don't care whether you're Brahmin or etc. or rich or poor, caste, income doesn't matter. So long as you do score well in an exam, we will take you. But thanks to quota and similar examples, then you start wondering, our effort to become meritocratic, is it getting, I've heard of people, and I know a few where from class 8 the child is sent to quota and they study and join IITs. Something, some of those things, how do we, without any violence, slowly improve? Slowly improve. And I don't laugh, because I find it painful to even think of it. You can't say ban all entrance exams, then it goes to the other extreme.
Yeah.
But what started as an intended meritocracy is ending up to be something else.
It's stifling. What the online degree, IIT Madras, we basically selecting people without exams. So we're trying to break through. That's the breakthrough model. Yeah, so we are trying to look at how we can basically test people as they go along in the program rather than at the entrance. So it's open to everybody, but there's a funnel. It's harder to get.
Honestly, I think in IIT Madras, PS in data science is probably one of the finest examples of where I started the presentation with. One, IIT Madras has 12,000 students in their campus. By introducing this program online, in a period of 3 years, they have 35,000 students. That's a scale that one institution can create. Second, no entrance examination. Their assessment criteria is what defines what they get at the end of the year. Third, it's open to all disciplines of study. Students can pursue bachelor's in history, with probably maybe some qualifying criteria, bachelor's in philosophy, bachelor's in physics, and still do their bachelor's in data science by the side, which I think is what brings a capability, the data capability across the board. And it's just not limited to engineering and technology students. And finally, I was surprised when Kamakoti, the director, told me once, I think this is also published so I can share it, the father and the son are jointly pursuing the program.
There is an example of that.
Right, so I think it dissolves all the structures that Ajit Balakrishnan was talking about, right?
Absolutely. Thank you for pointing it, because we have this devastating separation of humanities and sciences. At that time we took it for granted, but today attempts have been made to bridge that. Humanities come, sciences and mathematics together are leading to breakthroughs now. So I think that's a wonderful thing you guys are doing.
Okay, so the last theme, and then I will go to questions from the audience, is about what should the institutions themselves do in terms of processes. Do they need to change what they are doing? For example, you mentioned, Ramkumar, that we should try and look at courses which involve multiple institutions, for example. You mentioned, for example, that we need to restructure the way we offer a single course. So do we do the innovation in the institute at the level of programs, the kind of programs that we set up? Or do we do the innovation in terms of how we structure the courses within the program? Or how do we structure within a course? What do we do? What should be the institution's response to expectations?
I think the difficulty is, I think that nobody knows the answers to this. Especially, I mean, the question which I raised, which is about how to restructure assessment, right? So certainly, I think introduction to programming, the kind of the course which I spoke about. So there are 2 or 3 computer science education focused conferences, and I think nowadays, the last 2 years at least, 40% of the papers are about this: how to restructure first year programming course, including assessment. So I think there is no clear answer to this, and therefore it's hard to make a prescription as to how an institution should respond. But certainly I think there should be an attempt to get faculty to contribute to the discussion. It may not be perfect, but at least to recognize that something needs to be done. I think that's already
encourage innovation and debate.
Yeah, and I think this is sharing is something which is, I mean, it's not that any one person has a monopoly on an idea. So once somebody finds something that works, other people may take it and restructure it according to their needs. I think that there needs to be a discussion. I don't think there is enough of a discussion. Part of it also goes back to Ramkumar's earlier complaint, which is about this affiliated university system, right? See, in a sense, a lot of, I mean, if you leave out the IITs and a few institutions, a lot of the faculty have kind of handed off this responsibility for assessment because they are not involved, right? It's an exam set by the university, and but the surprising thing was that, again, in ACM we were trying to argue that this should not be the case, that the faculty are the best people to set exams for. It is actually quite surprising that a large number of people who teach in these affiliated colleges are actually afraid of setting exams. They don't want that responsibility. So that is again a mindset which I think has to be changed among that group of faculty, that convince them that they have the capability and the capacity. And again, maybe work together. They don't have to set the exam individually for each. I mean, they can, especially in some of these, large-scale colleges, there are many sections. So there are typically number of faculty teaching the course together. They can sit together and write an exam properly. Right? So I think a dialogue has to start. I think that is the first thing.
Maybe I'll just borrow what Ajit said a few minutes back. That execution is strategy. And coming up with an idea and hoping that someone will take it and then run with it just doesn't work. And this execution is possible. Look at the entire learning journey of a student. And along the journey, find out where AI plays a role. AI in admissions, AI in onboarding, AI in teaching learning process, AI in assessments, AI in placements. Identify what all can potentially be done through this entire journey. Let individuals take up that responsibility to say, this is an area that I am going to own. We are going to execute, try out how we can embrace AI and then build it into the process. Come back and share with everybody else. So the biggest challenge that I have had, I have thrived in this ambiguity. I started as a teacher, got into the industry, then became a teacher, then got into industry. Fine, I'm still undecided as to what I want to do in life. But in the corporate context, something is working well, you institutionalize it. If something is done well, very quickly that's shared with everybody else. As students, all of us have given marks to our faculty members in class, right? Fine, on a scale of 1 to 10. It could be because of exceptional knowledge, it could be friendliness, it's largely because of teaching style, fine, the sense of humor, whatever it is. But when we know that a particular professor is exceptionally good, and there is somebody new who joins the system, why doesn't that somebody new ever sit through the class of that professor? It beats me even today. If you know that someone is good, that apprentice model doesn't happen. There are very few exceptions, right? By and large, it rarely happens. A variety of reasons for it. Once you say that, hey, I have fixed this problem in the teaching learning process, I have used AI, come back and share. Fine with everybody. I'll give you an example. One of the most innovative companies in the world is 3M. They come up with X number of ideas. At one point in time, Xerox used to do this. Before they start any meeting, a 1-hour meeting, whoever is attending a meeting, the first 5 minutes are earmarked to share a particular innovation or a particular adoption in that business unit before they go on with the agenda. All of us, when we went to school, there will be someone in the prayer who will come and share something, right? There has to be mechanisms whereby you institutionalize all the good practices within an education institution. Share it more broadly, then ideas will spark more ideas. So the network effect will take over. I think that's extremely critical, where at every stage of the journey, see how is it that you can embrace AI? What are the results? Should we course correct? If something works fine, then institutionalize and get the entire organization to embrace it. That would probably be my solution.
Okay. All right. So I think we had a good discussion within the panelists. I'll just take a few questions that have been given to me from the audience, and if we have time after that, I think we are nearing the end of this session. Then we might take some more questions from the audience. Okay. So the first question is, how do you see the evolving role of faculty in today's startup-driven educational AI landscape, beyond teaching and research? So how do you see the evolving role of faculty? So what is the role of faculty in today's startup-driven educational AI landscape? There are many keywords here: startup-driven educational AI landscape, beyond teaching and research. So we have expectations of faculty which is beyond teaching and research.
Oh God, befuddled by the question.
So my understanding of the question is that if the goal is for students to move into, say, what Ashok was talking about, startups and building, so what role do faculty have to play in that journey? Or is it something which is outside the traditional?
Faculty can invite people, create programs and get people, startup entrepreneurs to present. At the end of it, faculty can coordinate a group discussion to learn something out of it, etc. Multiple things.
Yes, I would say the same thing. I think that it is probably a little of a bit of a stretch to expect that faculty will themselves be able to teach the kind of skills that are required for this. But I think, as you said, they could certainly consciously facilitate it, bring people in. So just as a case in point, so we have a master's in data science, and which is slightly different from the other programs here because it's not very, it's more industry focused and not academically focused. And one of the things that the students complained in the initial batches was that all the lectures, guest lectures that we had at CMI were very academic. People coming and talking about abstruse mathematics and computer science. So now what we do is we actually have a separate data science seminar where we bring in people who typically have an academic background, so they have some idea about, and they come on a Friday afternoon and they spend an hour talking about some problem in their domain, which they have addressed using some of the techniques which are familiar to them. And then they have a kind of open discussion. So I think this kind of, so this helps students get an idea about why they're learning what they're doing and how it will be applied to this. In the same way you could have startup people coming and talking about their experience, what are the kinds of things that they need.
For example, something you should have in all the IITs elsewhere is a course on how to fail cheaply. Because you know that 9 out of 10 startups fail. So you must figure out, and 9 out of 10 you try as a product innovator also fail. But how to fail cheaply is something very important to do. I've seen people go and persuade their mother to put their grandmother's house on lease or other mortgage and then commit suicide because the bank is taken over. God, I know 1,000 cases like that. I feel like weeping. So some ignorant, but if it comes from a professional family, they don't know how to they don't know how to cheat to get out of things. So how to fail cheaply is something as one among 100 other examples of how to teach.
Just at one point, I think there are 3 legs to the faculty stool. Teaching is one, research is a second, consulting is a third. Consultancy, I think some of the IITs, IIMs, and leading business schools in the country do a very good job of. There is no reason why faculty members shouldn't be seen as experts in a particular area, and they lend their voice and then do some consulting. It's very important, once you start consulting with the industry, getting the industry to come and then participate is a lot easier. So unless you create some kind of a model, fine, either incubate that within the disciplines of study, identify the right recruiters who can also come and then help you in the process. And in the days to come, if you are not going to consult, because that's actually the test of application of your knowledge, right? In a real life situation, then how do you even assess the effectiveness of a faculty? So I would probably suggest that even if they start small, consultancy with the external world, whether it's government, PSU, private sector, social enterprises, I think that leg of the stool will have to be understood.
Okay. Second question is, we have enough resources in the country, presumably, but we have not built an Indian LLM. I think it's a question that many people have asked. Why is it that we don't have a large language model out of India? This is a question. I think it speaks to the point that we are not a product nation or something, but yeah, please.
The biggest complaint about the IT services industry wherever I go, they say you guys are making tons of money, you have never created a product. Right? Today you look at China has created several products, Israel has created several products, Vietnam is creating products, Korea is creating products. Fine, you have all the technology know-how in India, but we haven't built a product of a certain scale or acceptance by the global market. It's true criticism. It's true criticism. I think where we were 20, 30 years back, we needed the IT services industry, right, to stabilize a lot of things. Today, I think that stability has reached where people can go and experiment and create brands, why even products, even brands in the global marketplace. We have had some examples of companies that tried to do it, but for a variety of reasons we didn't get there. I wrote a piece about 7 months back which became extremely controversial, but I'm very happy to share that. Last year alone, the Indian IT services industry generated $20 billion of free cash flow. 20 billion. And gave back 75% of it to the shareholders. Yeah, it's dividend, it is share buyback, through a variety of mechanisms. The listed company is generating so much of cash. So the question that I asked is, can India create what I call as risk capital, the way Alibaba, Tencent and others, they created newer models. It can be compute, it can be cyber, it can be products, it can be deep tech platforms, any of those. I think as a nation, we can't leave certain things to the government alone. The private enterprise will have to come in and start doing it. Whether it's creating the next LLM or not, that's separate. I think even adaptation or application of LLMs is good enough, as Nandan Nilekani is batting for it. But I do strongly believe, given that we are such a multilingual, multicultural country, we need more Sarvam AIs of the world. People who create models for India, and that's the only way by which we can scale as a nation. It's just my simple thought.
The short answer will be even the US funding and first few markets were all from DARPA, defense. Somebody in India must do, because the commercial market takes a long time to evolve for any category, very long, 8-10 years. So I think
deep tech needs a long horizon of funding and deep pockets. And that
8 deep pockets plus application and all the data needed to build a LLM.
Right. Okay, so the third question is, what is your advice for students and faculty for building a career that would give us a good pay grade, given that we are keeping on learning and unlearning? It's the expectation from us is increasing because we keep learning and unlearning and all that, so how are we going to be rewarded for that? Are blue-collar jobs the future? It's another question, I guess, a different question. It's an interesting question. Anybody wants to take that? Will the world go back to blue-collar? Yeah.
Forget money is not a focus of your life. It should be an outcome which comes that make sure that everyone is taken care of. It can't be your number one goal in life. That's called shareholder value maximization. It's a horrible thing to have. It destroys the country if you have it. My humble view.
So money is an outcome. It can't be the goal.
It can't be the goal of your life. It can't be. And that you realize it more and more as you cross your 60s and 70s and that gray hair. What will you do with
money?
5,000 crores? What will you do with it?
Are blue-collar jobs the future? Because there is a general belief that AI is going to take all the white-collar jobs. So what will be left is the things to do with the hands.
Then tell the kid, look, don't get frightened of technology. That question shows you're frightened of technology, so don't be frightened. Embrace it like you have a knife. Don't be frightened of the knife. Use it to cut vegetables.
Okay. You want to add anything to it? Okay, there is a question from the staff. How can we leverage AI to enhance human learning and critical thinking? So can we use AI for critical thinking rather than simply automating or replacing them? Yeah. Okay. All right, it's a tough question. I think that. Any other questions that anybody has from the audience? I think it's lunchtime and everybody is looking forward to winding up and going for lunch. But if there are any other questions, I'm happy to present it or get your panel to answer it. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah, no, outcomes, learning outcomes. Madhavan, you want to take it?
That's what I meant by saying that, that is actually the thing that we don't spend enough time thinking about. See, because we put down, there are all these, by now, these frameworks, this Bloom's taxonomy and all that. But that doesn't really answer the question. It just gives you some labels. This is about recall and this is about, but what questions should be asked fit those labels, right? And how should you frame the question so that, some standard examples are that, for example, if you ask a question, say, again, things which I am familiar with, if you ask somebody to analyze the complexity of an algorithm, right? Now, if it is an algorithm which is being taught in class, then it's a question of memorization. If it's an algorithm they have seen before, then it's a question of real analysis, right? So you have to be careful about. The same question can have very different interpretations depending on what the context is. So I think that is the real test. How well do you perceive the subject yourself, that you are able to gauge whether the question you are asking is difficult, easy, is it testing some conceptual understanding, is it just testing whether they remember basic facts. And I think that is very hard for many people to, even when they feel that they are confident about subject, to get to that level. That's why I made that point, that you have not understood the subject unless you can do this. And it's very hard. I did not realize it was such a challenge until I struggle, and I keep struggling. And I see the same mistakes coming every, there are 3 terms in IIT Madras, so every 4 months I get the same mistakes. I'm making the same corrections to the question papers set by these people. Yeah.
I'm very glad, Professor Mr. Balakrishnan, that you brought up this question of funding by defense. I mentioned this to my class also. There's been a Hollywood movie also that the Silicon Valley gets funding. This is also in relation to what Heisenberg writes in his introduction to physics and philosophy, that arms is the only universal component of science that people relate easily to science. But then that raises this question of science and ethics. That are you willing to work with something that will create a mess in the first place? That is liable to create a mess in the first place, and then you have to spend a lot of time and energy and lifetimes perhaps trying to, if possible, clean that mess.
It's a good question, but I'm just pointing out statistically, almost every major breakthrough in the history of mankind and technology has been spurred by some defense needs, or in nuclear science in totality. So I'm just pointing that out, and then put in enough control systems to make sure it doesn't get out of hand. That's separate. Separately, the question that you raised about what factors, I'm going to interpret what values factors to check to see the performance of your children, etc. There was a time when I was small that many people, not my father, others, thought that the way to success for your child would be contact, so you send them to Lovedale and Doon School and so on. That time, back in the 50s, even today some do. But our parents are too middle class to believe that. But that used to work at that time, very much in the 60s and 70s. All the multinational firms would hire people only from the Doon School type background. That is a fact. But that has changed now very dramatically. So in that sense, what is competence is also socio-culturally determined variable. So keep that in mind.
Okay, with that we'll wind up this panel and then thank you all for being patient.
So, if you could just wait for 5 minutes, we'll felicitate our distinguished speakers and request the Director General, Professor Madhavan Mukund, to please.
Ramkumar Ramamoorthy. Prof Madhavan Mukund. Prof G Venkatesh.
We'll take a group picture with all of you, if that is all right.
Mr. Umesh Dalal. Mr. T.S. Tirumurthy. And Professor Tridip Surud.
Thank you everyone for joining us today on this momentous occasion. Thanks to the distinguished speakers, faculty, staff, and all the people involved in organizing the event. Thank you so much for all your efforts.